March of 2004, a tragic event shook the community of Cyo Arjo in East Java, Indonesia, leaving a lasting scar on its residents. The incident involved a construction worker named Ilas, who committed a brutal act against the family of a local police officer. This shocking event not only stunned the neighborhood, but also exposed vulnerabilities in household security. Ilas had been employed as a builder at the home of Daniel, a police officer stationed nearby. Over time, he became familiar with the household routines and the family members. On a fateful day, Ilas discovered a sickle, locally called a curate, inside the house. Seizing the opportunity, he armed himself with the weapon and launched a violent attack. His first victim was Christina, Daniel's 15-year-old daughter. Ilas entered her room and without hesitation assaulted her with the sickle, resulting in her tragic death. The severity of her injuries highlighted the brutality of the assault. The reasons behind this heinous act remain uncertain, with some suggesting personal grievances or possible mental health issues as motives. News of the tragedy spread rapidly, sending shockwaves through the community. Residents struggled to comprehend how such violence could occur within the safety of a family home. The incident underscored the unpredictable nature of human behavior and the hidden dangers that can exist even in familiar environments. Following the attack, law enforcement intensified their efforts to locate Ilas, who had fled the scene. The case sparked discussions about the importance of thorough background checks for domestic workers and the need for increased household security measures. It served as a grim reminder of the potential risks posed by trusted individuals. The memory of this event remains vivid in the collective consciousness of Cyo Arjo. When Daniel discovered his daughter's body, it was a scene of horror. Christina lay motionless on her bedroom floor, blood pooling beneath her small frame. The metallic scent filled the air, and the walls bore silent witness to the violence inflicted upon her. A father sworn to protect was suddenly faced with the devastating reality that his own home had been violated, tearing his family apart through an act of unimaginable cruelty. His scream shattered the quiet of that evening, drawing neighbors out of their homes, their faces a mixture of concern and disbelief. As the gravity of the situation became clear, witnesses' faces shifted from curiosity to horror. Some froze in place, overwhelmed by the gruesome scene before them, while others turned away, hands trembling as they whispered silent prayers. The neighborhood, once a tranquil and idyllic community, had transformed into a tableau of chaos and fear. Within minutes, police arrived, their familiar presence now tinged with somber duty. Officers who had once worked alongside Daniel now faced the heartbreaking task of securing the crime scene, their professionalism strained by personal sorrow. Crime scene investigators moved swiftly, meticulously photographing every detail, collecting samples, and searching for clues that might lead to the perpetrator. They noted the forced entry into Christina's room, the disarray of her belongings, and most notably, the missing sickle used in the assault. The weapon appeared to have been deliberately taken by the attacker, leaving behind only questions. Despite his extensive experience with violent crimes, Daniel was overwhelmed by grief. He collapsed onto the front steps of his home, head bowed, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. His colleagues gave him space, recognizing that in that moment he was not a police officer but a grieving father. The sound of his anguish echoed through the night, a stark reminder of life's fragile nature. The investigators quickly shifted their focus to Ilas, the missing laborer. Known for his quiet demeanor, Ilas had never been suspected of violence nor caused trouble, yet now he was the prime suspect in a brutal murder. His disappearance intensified suspicions, prompting authorities to issue a nationwide alert. News of the crime spread rapidly, capturing the attention of local stations and national newspapers alike. The brutality of the act, combined with the involvement of a police officer's family, made the case a matter of national concern. Many wondered how such violence could infiltrate a community and whether anyone was truly safe. Reconstructing the events, detectives interviewed witnesses and questioned neighbors. An elderly woman living nearby remembered seeing Ilas loitering near the house earlier that day, his face unreadable as he stared at the windows. Another local shopkeeper reported that Ilas had purchased a substantial amount of food and supplies 2 days earlier, as if preparing for something unknown. The most significant lead emerged when police traced Ilyas's last known movements. A bus driver recognized his photograph, recalling that Ilyas had boarded a bus heading toward a remote village several miles away. Armed with this information, authorities launched a comprehensive search, hoping to apprehend Ilyas before he vanished entirely. The manhunt consumed countless hours, with officers scouring streets, exploring distant villages, and interrogating anyone who might hold a clue. The case remained urgent and intense, driven by the need to find the suspect and bring clarity to a community shaken to its core. Authorities sealed off every route leading to the city of Cyo Arjo, scrutinizing every checkpoint, roadblock, and transportation hub with intense vigilance. Once renowned for its peaceful rhythm, the city now thrummed with an unsettling tension as residents grappled with the knowledge that a suspect was still at large. For Daniel, the days stretched interminably. His daughter's funeral had faded into a blur of grief, and only the relentless pursuit of justice kept him from succumbing to despair. A week after the tragedy, a vital lead emerged. A fisherman from a small village along the Branas River reported spotting a disheveled man matching Ilyas's description near the riverbank under cover of night. The police, unwilling to overlook any detail, mobilized in force, sweeping through dense foliage and abandoned huts in the area. The pursuit had taken them far from the original crime scene, yet their resolve remained unshaken. Late that evening, a breakthrough occurred when a patrol officer noticed movement among a cluster of banana trees. Signaling to his team, floodlights illuminated the area, revealing Ilyas crouched in the dirt. His clothes were torn, and his face appeared gaunt from days of deprivation. As he realized he had been discovered, his hands trembled. "Don't move," commanded an officer, gun raised. But Ilyas, overwhelmed by fear or defiance, suddenly bolted. He sprinted toward the river, kicking up dirt with every step, desperation fueling his flight. Officers gave chase, shouting for him to stop. Reaching the water's edge, he faced the swift, relentless current. For a moment, he hesitated. Then, perhaps in a final act of resistance or surrender, he plunged into the river. The officers reacted instantly. Some pursued along the bank, others called for backup, yet the river was dark and unforgiving. Ilyas struggled against the powerful flow, his arms flailing as he was pulled under. In an instant, he vanished beneath the surface. The officers watched helplessly as the river swallowed him whole. Hours of searching followed, boats deployed, divers diving into the murky depths, yet there was no sign of him. It was as if the water had erased his presence entirely. Officially, he was declared missing, presumed drowned, but without a body, closure remained elusive. Daniel received the news with conflicted feelings. His daughter's murderer was likely gone, but the victory felt hollow. No justice, no answers. What had driven Ilyas to commit such a brutal act? Was it premeditated or a moment of uncontrollable rage? These questions haunted him, yet he knew he would never find the answers. Weeks turned into months, and the case gradually went cold. The community, though slowly returning to normal, carried a lingering sense of unease. Parents tightened their watchfulness, doors were secured earlier, and trust in strangers diminished. Then, in late 2004, a fisherman discovered human remains tangled among the roots of a tree along the riverbank, offering a faint glimmer of closure but also deepening the mystery that still shadowed the town. Downstream from the spot where Ilas had leapt into the river, the remains were so battered and unrecognizable that only forensic analysis confirmed her identity. For Daniel, this confirmation brought a sense of closure, yet it did little to ease the ache of losing his daughter. Nothing could undo her absence, and the case that had begun amid chaos and horror concluded with the river's cold, unfeeling embrace. Life moved forward, as it always does, but for those who had endured the events of March 2004, the scars remained. Some wounds never truly healed. In another story from that same year, Japan's justice system faced intense scrutiny over a high-profile case involving a researcher named Dr. Takashi Okamoto. Indicted in the United States on charges of industrial espionage, his legal ordeal shed light on the complexities of international law and the difficulties of extradition. Dr. Okamoto, a respected scientist specializing in Alzheimer's research, had previously worked at a laboratory in Cleveland, Ohio. In May of DVE Takashi Okamoto, U.S., authorities accused him of stealing valuable genetic materials, alleging he misappropriated proprietary research, a serious offense under American law. The situation intensified nearly 2 years later when the U.S. formally requested his extradition. In response, Japanese authorities detained Dr. Okamoto on February 2, 2004, as the Tokyo High Court prepared to consider the extradition request. This marked a historic moment, as it was the first time Japan faced such a request from the United States since their bilateral treaty had come into effect in 1980. Throughout the proceedings, Dr. Okamoto maintained his innocence, claiming the materials were his property and lacked proprietary value, thus denying any criminal intent. His defense argued that his actions did not constitute a crime under Japanese law, which does not have specific statutes addressing industrial espionage. On March 29, 2004, the Tokyo High Court delivered its verdict, denying the U.S. request and ordering his release. The court found that his actions did not meet the legal definitions of theft or property destruction under Japanese law. This decision underscored the principle that extradition requires the offense to be recognized as a crime in both countries, known as dual criminality. The ruling had profound implications, highlighting the differences between Japanese and American legal frameworks, especially regarding intellectual property and industrial espionage. It also reflected Japan's cautious stance on extraditing its citizens, particularly when the alleged acts are not clearly criminal within its own legal system. This case marked the first time since the treaty's implementation that Japan refused an extradition request from the United States. Historically, Japan has extradited 31 individuals to the United States under this treaty, including 8 Japanese nationals. The country's policy has been to extradite its citizens only when the alleged conduct is also considered illegal under Japanese law. The case of Dr. Okamoto ignited discussions about Japan's need to revisit its legal provisions related to industrial espionage, highlighting the difficulties that arise in international cooperation, where differing legal standards can lead to complex disputes. As globalization advances, such cases emphasize the importance of aligning legal frameworks to better address cross-border crimes effectively. Following the court's decision, Dr. Okamoto expressed relief, reaffirming that he had not broken any laws. His case became a landmark in Japan's legal history, illustrating the delicate balance between respecting national legal principles and fulfilling international commitments. The ruling issued by the Tokyo High Court on March 29, 2004, provoked varied reactions from both Japan and the United States. It was not just a legal verdict, but also a statement on the complexities of international law and the limits of bilateral agreements. The U.S. Department of Justice voiced disappointment, warning that refusing to extradite Dr. Takashi Okamoto could set a troubling precedent for future cases involving international research collaborations. Officials in Washington feared this decision might encourage more theft of intellectual property, especially in fields where advanced research holds significant commercial and medical value. Conversely, many Japanese legal scholars argued that the decision aligned with Japan's long-standing extradition principles, which require dual criminality, meaning the act must be a crime in both countries. Since Japan lacked specific laws criminalizing industrial espionage, there was no legal basis for extraditing Dr. Okamoto. Experts contended that if Japan had acquiesced to the U.S. request, it could have risked allowing foreign legal standards to override domestic laws, setting a dangerous precedent. Upon his release, Dr. Okamoto addressed the media, maintaining his innocence. He stated that the materials he took were his own research findings, not proprietary information from his former American laboratory. He emphasized that his goal was to continue his scientific work in Japan, not to profit from stolen data. His supporters, including former colleagues and members of Japan's scientific community, echoed his defense, asserting that his contributions to Alzheimer's research were legitimate and that his prosecution was driven more by industry competition than actual misconduct. Despite his release, however, Dr. Okamoto's professional reputation had suffered lasting damage, casting a shadow over his scientific career. Previously a promising neurobiologist, Dr. Okamoto's career was overshadowed by his arrest and ongoing legal struggles, which tarnished his reputation within the international scientific community. Many prestigious institutions hesitated to associate with him, fearing controversy, though a few universities in Japan showed some willingness to allow him to pursue research. Nonetheless, no institution offered him a permanent position, highlighting the personal and professional toll of the case. This legal ordeal prompted Japan's authorities to scrutinize their stance on international issues related to industrial espionage and intellectual property protection. Lawmakers debated whether existing laws sufficiently safeguarded proprietary research and discussed the need for reforms to address the rising threats of intellectual property theft. Several members of Japan's parliament called for discussions on updating legal frameworks to prevent similar conflicts in the future. Across the Pacific, pressure grew in the United States to revisit the extradition treaty with Japan. Some policymakers advocated for amendments that would grant greater flexibility in handling cases involving economic and intellectual property concerns. However, others warned that such changes could complicate diplomatic relations between the two nations, which were vital for trade, defense, and technological cooperation. The decision not to extradite Dr. Okamoto was not unprecedented. Historical legal differences had previously caused friction between the countries. American officials understood that any effort to renegotiate the treaty would require careful diplomatic diplomacy. Public opinion in Japan was divided. Some believed Dr. Okamoto had been unfairly targeted by foreign legal systems, while others argued his case revealed weaknesses in Japan's approach to intellectual property disputes. Japanese business leaders expressed concern that the country's relatively lax industrial espionage laws could make it an attractive environment for individuals seeking to exploit legal gaps. As research and development became central to economic strength, protecting proprietary data grew into a critical issue for Japanese corporations and universities alike. In the aftermath, the case's repercussions extended beyond the courtroom, influencing legal, political, and scientific discussions on both sides of the Pacific. The U.S. government faced ongoing challenges in managing future cases involving American research institutions and foreign scientists, while Japan considered whether its legal framework was adequate to handle the increasing complexity of international intellectual property conflicts. Although the case was officially concluded, debates persisted for years among legal experts, policymakers, and scientists. As months passed, Dr. Okamoto's situation continued to fuel discussions about industrial espionage, intellectual property laws, and the broader risks of research theft. While the Tokyo High Court's ruling was definitive, the controversy underscored the need for clearer regulations and stronger protections in the realm of international scientific collaboration. The case raised a troubling question for Japan. Was the country too permissive in safeguarding sensitive research? For the United States, it served as a stark reminder that even strong international alliances do not always guarantee legal cooperation. Within Japan, the academic and business communities were sharply divided. Some corporate leaders feared that the court's decision might encourage researchers to share proprietary data without fear of repercussions, worrying that Japan's legal system could become a refuge for those seeking to exploit loopholes in industrial espionage laws. In an era when scientific progress increasingly fuels national economies, protecting research and development was crucial. Conversely, many academics, especially in public research institutions, believed that the U.S. had overreached by trying to criminalize Dr. Okamoto's actions. They viewed the case as an example of a powerful foreign government using its legal system to police scientific activities beyond its borders. These critics argued that the push for extradition was driven less by justice and more by the pharmaceutical industry's desire to dominate the global Alzheimer's research market. Meanwhile, Dr. Okamoto found himself in a complex situation. Although he avoided extradition and incarceration in the United States, he was far from cleared in the court of public opinion. Many Japanese universities hesitated to associate with him, fearing that any connection might invite international scrutiny. Research institutions, especially those with overseas partnerships, remained cautious about employing a scientist whose reputation had become entangled in legal controversy. Despite his insistence on innocence, suspicion lingered around him. Desperate to continue his work, Okamoto sought to rebuild his career through independent research, applying for grants from private foundations and collaborating with smaller universities less concerned about public image. Yet, the damage was done. The stigma attached to his name made it nearly impossible to regain his previous standing within the scientific community. Once a respected researcher with promising discoveries, he was now seen as a cautionary figure, his career derailed by a legal battle that blurred the lines between ethics, law, and international diplomacy. In the United States, the failure to extradite Okamoto sparked calls for a reassessment of intellectual property laws and extradition treaties. Some lawmakers advocated for stricter regulations on foreign researchers working in American laboratories, emphasizing the need for increased oversight to prevent similar incidents. Others proposed revising the treaty with Japan to close the loophole that allowed Okamoto to evade prosecution. However, renegotiating such agreements proved to be a complex and sensitive process, reflecting the broader challenges of balancing legal cooperation with diplomatic relations. In 2004, Japan faced a pivotal moment when it was unlikely to accept any amendments that would undermine its sovereignty or compel it to adopt American legal standards for industrial espionage. Despite ongoing legal and political upheaval, the scientific community pressed on with its research, regardless of the controversy surrounding the case. Researchers continued the Alzheimer's studies that Okamoto had initially led, with others picking up where he left off. If there had been any hope that his groundbreaking discoveries would be celebrated for their medical significance, that hope was now overshadowed by the legal battle he faced. By the end of that year, the case had mostly faded from public attention, but its repercussions persisted. The Okamoto affair revealed significant flaws in international legal cooperation, exposing the difficulties in prosecuting cross-border intellectual property violations. It also compelled Japan to confront its outdated laws on industrial espionage, though whether meaningful reforms would follow remained uncertain. After the trial, Okamoto chose a quiet life, withdrawing from public view to focus on limited independent research. Some say he relocated to a small town in northern Japan, living in relative obscurity far from the vibrant scientific circles that once defined his career. Yet, even in his absence, the questions his case raised continued to resonate. In an era of rapid scientific progress, who truly owns knowledge? Where should the line be drawn between collaborative research and theft? And most critically, what toll should one pay for challenging those boundaries? These enduring questions, left unresolved by the events of March 2004, proved difficult for both Japan and the United States to answer. In the early hours of March 2, 2004, a tragic incident unfolded in Seoul County, Oklahoma, leaving a deep mark on the local community. David Brian Magman, accompanied by two others, arrived at the home of James Howard, a member of the Seoul Nation. The house had hosted a birthday celebration the night before, and as the festivities wound down, the household was unaware of the danger approaching. Armed with a pistol, Magman confronted someone outside the residence, resulting in a physical altercation during which he shot the individual in the abdomen. This violent act marked the beginning of a series of devastating events. Magman then entered the house, where he found James Howard asleep. Without hesitation, he shot Howard multiple times in the chest, ending his life instantly. The violence continued as Magman moved into a bedroom where two other Seoul Nation members, Karen Wolf and Lucille Mert, were sleeping. He shot Wolf in the head, killing her immediately, while Mert was struck in the shoulder and head. Despite her severe injuries, Mert managed to survive long enough to identify Magman as the shooter before succumbing to her wounds 2 weeks later. Following the shootings, Magman and his accomplices fled the scene, attempting to escape the consequences of their actions. In an effort to hide their involvement, the perpetrator attempted to conceal the murder weapon, but law enforcement agencies, including the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, the Seminole County Sheriff's Office, the Seminole Nation Light Horse Police, and the FBI, worked together to conduct a comprehensive investigation. Their coordinated efforts led to the recovery of the concealed firearm and the eventual arrest of the suspect, Magnum. The community was left devastated by the brutality of the crimes and the loss of 3 respected members of the Seminole Nation. Vigils were held, and an outpouring of support emerged for the victims' families as many struggled to find meaning in such senseless violence. As legal proceedings commenced, the case drew widespread attention, not only because of its heinous nature, but also due to the broader issues of violence within Native American communities and the jurisdictional challenges that often complicate such cases. The collaboration between federal and local authorities highlighted the importance of unified efforts in the pursuit of justice. The upcoming trial of David Brian Magan was poised to become a focal point for discussions on criminal justice, community healing, and the systemic hurdles faced by indigenous populations across the United States. Throughout this difficult period, the memories of James Howard, Karen Wolfe, and Lucilla McGirt remained vivid, serving as a solemn reminder of the lives lost and the lasting impact of that tragic night in March of 2004. As investigators pieced together the evidence, the small community of Seminole County grappled with shock and grief, trying to comprehend the violence that had shattered families and left deep scars. The crime scene itself bore witness to the brutality, walls and floors stained with blood, scattered shell casings, and an eerie silence filling a home once alive with activity. Law enforcement meticulously documented every detail, knowing that even the smallest piece of evidence could be decisive in securing a conviction. Witness statements, forensic analyses, and ballistic reports all pointed to one clear conclusion: Magan had intentionally carried out the murders with calculated precision. A crucial piece of evidence was the final statement of Lucilla McGirt, who, despite suffering multiple gunshot wounds, managed to hold on long enough to identify Magan as the shooter. Her testimony, given in her last moments, carried significant legal weight, as statements made by victims on their deathbeds are often regarded as highly credible in court. Law enforcement officials meticulously documented her statements, ensuring her voice would be preserved even after her passing. Alongside her testimony, authorities recovered the murder weapon, hidden in a wooded area several miles from the crime scene. The firearm, a .4-caliber pistol, was confirmed through ballistic analysis to match the bullets found in the victims. Forensic examinations also revealed fingerprints belonging to Magnan on the weapon, conclusively linking him to the crime. Despite this evidence, Magnan displayed no remorse after his arrest. He refused to cooperate with investigators or offer any explanation for his actions. His accomplices, who had initially helped him escape, later turned against him in exchange for reduced sentences. Under police interrogation, they recounted the events of the night with chilling detail, portraying a man driven by intense anger and a desire for revenge. Court records later revealed that Magnan had a history of violent behavior, including multiple incarcerations for assault and drug-related offenses. Some believed that his actions on the night of March 2, 2004, were the result of years of unchecked aggression. Others speculated that a personal dispute with one of the victims might have sparked the attack, though no definitive motive was ever established. The prosecution built its case with precision, knowing the importance of securing a conviction given the gravity of the crime. They sought the death penalty, arguing that Magnan's cold-blooded conduct warranted the harshest punishment. Meanwhile, the defense aimed to portray him as a troubled individual whose past struggles, including substance abuse and difficult upbringing, contributed to his actions. As the trial approached, tensions in the community intensified. Many residents of Soule County viewed the case as a crucial test of the justice system's ability to hold violent offenders accountable. The victims' families attended every hearing, their faces marked by grief but also resolve. They wanted justice to be served and for their loved ones' lives to be honored through accountability. In the months leading up to the proceedings, legal experts debated the case's complexities, especially considering the involvement of Native American victims, which introduced jurisdictional challenges under both state and federal law. Nonetheless, given the severity of the crimes, there was little doubt that Magnan would face the full extent of legal consequences. Throughout the trial, Magnan remained defiant, showing no emotion and refusing to acknowledge the pain he caused. His apparent indifference only intensified the anger of the victims' families, who saw his lack of remorse as further evidence of his guilt. As the trial drew nearer, the community prepared itself for the final chapter in a case that had profoundly affected their lives. The pursuit of justice weighed heavily on everyone, especially the families of James Howard, Karen Wolfe, and Lucilla McGirt, for whom closure could only come through a conviction. The proceedings against David Brian Magnan commenced in late 2004, capturing the attention of legal experts, journalists, and local residents alike. For months, this case had stirred grief and unrest across Seoul County, but now the moment of reckoning had arrived. The courtroom was filled to capacity on the opening day, with the victims' families seated prominently at the front, their gaze fixed on the defendant who had shattered their worlds. The prosecution swiftly laid out their case, presenting compelling evidence, ballistic reports, forensic analyses, witness testimonies, and most notably, Lucilla McGirt's final words spoken in the presence of authorities. Her last whispered statement, "It was Magnum," before succumbing to her injuries, carried undeniable weight and served as a stark indictment of the defendant. Further strengthening the case, prosecutors introduced audio recordings from police interrogations of Magnan's accomplices, who recounted in chilling detail how the murders had unfolded. They described how Magnan had fired relentlessly into the residence, stood over his victims with apparent indifference, and later disposed of the weapon to conceal his involvement. These witnesses testified in exchange for reduced sentences, but their accounts were corroborated by physical evidence, leaving little doubt about Magnan's guilt. The defense struggled to propose an alternative explanation. They claimed that Magnan had been intoxicated on the night of the crimes, suggesting he might not have been fully in control of his actions. They also argued that he had been provoked, though they failed to substantiate this claim convincingly. At one point, they attempted to undermine the credibility of McGirt's dying declaration, but the judge swiftly dismissed such arguments, ruling her statement was both legally admissible and highly persuasive. Over the following weeks, witness after witness took the stand, each recounting the tragic events of March 2nd, 2004. Family members of the victims shared heartbreaking stories about how these losses had devastated their lives. James Howard's mother described her son as the cornerstone of their family, known for his kindness and generosity. Karen Wolfe's sister tearfully recalled how Karen, a devoted mother, had left behind children who would never see her again. By the time the prosecution concluded, the evidence was overwhelming, and the jury, comprising individuals from diverse backgrounds, listened intently, their faces reflecting the emotional toll of hearing such harrowing details. When it was time for the defense to present its case, it became evident they had little to support in favor of Magnan. He chose not to testify, likely following his attorney's advice, who understood that any statement from him might deepen his potential for self-incrimination. Although his prior criminal record was not directly admissible as evidence, it was widely known within the community, shaping public perception. Many viewed him as a man with a history of violence who had crossed a line. The defense's weak arguments failed to sway the jury or alter public opinion. After closing statements, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the judge announced the decision. Guilt on all charges. The families of the victims clung to one another, some weeping, others nodding in quiet relief. In the legal sense, justice had been served. When sentencing arrived, the prosecution pressed for the death penalty, citing the extreme brutality of the crimes as justification for the harshest punishment available. The defense, in a final effort, requested life imprisonment without parole. Ultimately, the judge imposed the death sentence, citing the premeditated nature of the murders and Magnan's complete lack of remorse, leaving no room for mercy. For the families of James Howard, Karen Wolfe, and Lucilla McGirt, the verdict offered a measure of closure, though their grief would never fully fade. They had fought tirelessly, attending every court session and reliving that tragic night repeatedly. Now, they could begin the difficult process of healing and moving forward. Magnan's case became a pivotal moment in Oklahoma's legal history, highlighting ongoing issues of violence within Native American communities and the complex jurisdictional challenges that often accompany such cases. It also underscored the importance of interagency cooperation, as efforts by the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, the local sheriff's office, the Seoul Nation Light Horse Police, and the FBI were crucial in securing justice. Years later, the case continued to be referenced in discussions about violent crime and the difficulties of prosecuting cases involving both state and federal jurisdictions. While Magnan remained on death row awaiting his ultimate fate, the victims' families carried on with their lives, forever changed by that tragic night in March of 2004. Though time moved forward, the memories of James Howard, Karen Wolfe, and Lucilla McGirt persisted. Their names were spoken in prayers, their faces preserved in photographs, and their stories passed down to ensure they would never be forgotten. Ultimately, the justice system fulfilled its role, but no verdict or sentence could undo the profound pain inflicted by one man's senseless act of violence. The case of Daniel Zier illuminated the complex tension between religious liberty and federal security measures, raising important questions about constitutional rights. Zier, a Canadian citizen and member of an Amish community that strictly adheres to its faith's prohibition against images, believed that being photographed violated his religious principles. In June of 2001, Zier moved to the United States, married Ruth, and settled in Licking Township, Clarion County, Pennsylvania. Their life was deeply rooted in Amish traditions, avoiding modern conveniences and focusing on their religious commitments. In December of 2003, Zier traveled to Canada to visit his aging father. When he attempted to return to the U.S. in January of the following year, border officials stopped him, explaining that he had effectively self-deported and could not re-enter without proper identification, specifically a photo ID. Zier's religious convictions prevented him from complying with this requirement, creating a legal deadlock. The core issue centered on federal regulations mandating photographic identification for those seeking legal residence, justified by the Department of Homeland Security as essential for thorough background checks and national security. Zier proposed an alternative. He was willing to be fingerprinted, arguing that fingerprints could serve as a reliable identification method without infringing on his religious beliefs. However, federal prosecutors dismissed this proposal, insisting that a photograph was essential for identity verification. Zier then filed a lawsuit, claiming that the photo requirement violated his First Amendment rights to religious freedom. This legal move was particularly significant given the Amish community's general aversion to litigation, highlighting the importance Zier placed on his religious principles. The case attracted national attention, igniting debates about how to balance religious liberties with government security demands. Legal scholars and civil rights advocates discussed the broader implications for religious minorities and the extent to which government regulations could conflict with personal beliefs. As of April of 2004, the case was still pending, with both sides preparing to present their arguments in court. Its outcome could establish a precedent for accommodating religious freedoms within federal identification policies, especially in matters related to national security. Ultimately, Zier's legal challenge underscored the ongoing struggle between individual rights and collective safety, a theme deeply embedded in American legal and cultural discourse. The case served as a stark reminder of the difficulties faced when safeguarding religious beliefs while implementing necessary security measures. The protection of constitutional freedoms, especially when balanced against the need to maintain national security, became a focal point as the case of Daniel Zier unfolded. The stakes extended beyond one individual, touching on the rights of the Amish community and other religious groups who hold similar convictions. The core issue was not merely Zier's refusal to be photographed. It was a legal challenge that raised fundamental questions about religious liberty, its boundaries, and the authority of the federal government to enforce security measures. At the heart of the dispute were the First Amendment, which guarantees religious freedom, and the 14th Amendment, ensuring equal protection under the law. Zier's legal team argued that compelling him to present a photo ID violated these constitutional protections. They maintained that the government's insistence on a photograph infringed upon Zir's deeply rooted religious beliefs, which prohibit the use of images for spiritual and cultural reasons. For Zir and his community, having their picture taken was seen as an act of vanity, conflicting with their core values of humility and modesty, principles passed down through generations. Conversely, federal authorities emphasized national security, citing the importance of standardized identification procedures in a post-Minas deviat ordinatsat world. They underscored that such measures were vital for controlling immigration and verifying identities. Officials from the Department of Homeland Security explained that photographs were essential for comprehensive background checks and biometric screenings, which are crucial for public safety. Without these, they argued, it would be impossible to accurately identify individuals entering or leaving the country, thus compromising security. The case quickly became a focal point for legal and political debate, highlighting the tension between religious rights and public safety. While the government had a compelling interest in protecting the nation, it was also bound by constitutional limits that safeguard individual freedoms, including religious practices. The Amish, known for their pacifist beliefs and rejection of modern technology, had long received certain accommodations. This case, however, tested the extent of those allowances. Public opinion was divided. Many Americans sympathized with Zir's religious convictions, viewing his refusal as a sincere expression of faith and commitment. They believed that the government could find alternative ways to verify identity, such as using non-photographic identification, without infringing on religious freedoms. This debate underscored the ongoing challenge of balancing security needs with the preservation of fundamental rights. The case centered on a fundamental issue of identity and religious expression, exemplified by a refusal to comply with a fingerprinting requirement. This was not merely about a single individual. It reflected a broader challenge to how America could uphold its core values of religious liberty and tolerance amid heightened security concerns. Critics argued that the refusal was an unreasonable obstacle to a lawful system designed to protect national interests. They believed that the fingerprinting process was a vital tool for tracking entrants and ensuring proper vetting, emphasizing that national safety should take precedence over individual religious practices, especially in matters of immigration and security. Some viewed the stance as a form of religious exemption that could undermine the nation's security framework. As legal preparations advanced, Zir's defense team understood they faced a difficult task, convincing the court that their clients' religious rights had been unjustly infringed upon while addressing legitimate security concerns. This required not only solid legal arguments, but also a nuanced understanding of how religious freedoms can coexist with the practical realities of a security-conscious society. The Amish community, traditionally reserved and disengaged from public affairs, found itself unexpectedly in the spotlight. Local leaders expressed fears that the case might set a precedent affecting others within their faith who might encounter similar legal challenges in the future. While most of the larger Amish population remained quietly observant during the proceedings, they watched anxiously, worried about how the outcome could impact their way of life. For them, this was more than a legal matter. It was about safeguarding the integrity of their religious practices against external pressures. Meanwhile, Daniel Zier's personal life was in turmoil, caught between his devout faith and the demands of modern society. He felt increasingly isolated, longing for his wife Ruth, who remained in Pennsylvania, while he navigated the legal battle far from home. His children, too young to grasp the full scope of the controversy, grew up amid the tension and uncertainty. Zier's unwavering commitment to his religious principles, despite personal and familial sacrifices, highlighted the depth of his conviction. Throughout the process, he remained resolute in his refusal to comply with government demands, recognizing that his stance could influence future legal approaches to religious rights in the United States. As the trial approached, it became evident that its outcome would have lasting implications for the balance between religious freedoms and national security, shaping the direction of similar disputes in the years to come. The question of whether government security measures should take precedence over individual religious freedoms has become a focal point in recent legal debates. As the case involving Daniel unfolds, its outcome could set a significant precedent, shaping how courts balance the fundamental right to religious practice against national security concerns. The upcoming weeks are critical as the legal arguments grow more intricate, turning the courtroom into a battleground of competing interests. On one side, the U.S. government emphasizes the importance of robust identification systems to safeguard the nation. They argue that in a world shaped by recent threats, secure and standardized identification methods are essential for tracking individuals entering and leaving the country, thereby protecting citizens. The government views the refusal to comply with the photo identification requirement as a deliberate challenge to this security framework, which they see as vital for maintaining order and preventing threats. Opposing this stance, Daniel's legal team highlights the long-standing tradition of religious exemptions within American law. They point out that the Amish community, to which Daniel belongs, has historically been granted special accommodations, such as exemptions from military service and voting, when these conflicted with their religious beliefs. They argue that this tradition of accommodation should extend to identification procedures, especially since alternative methods, like fingerprinting, an option Daniel was willing to undergo, could serve as equally effective means of verification. Throughout the trial, public opinion remains divided. Many religious and civil rights advocates see the case as a test of the government's respect for religious liberties. They warn that forcing Daniel to comply with the photo requirement could set a dangerous precedent, threatening the broader protection of religious freedoms. Conversely, the government maintains that security concerns in a post-heinous deviat ordinatio world justify prioritizing identification measures, asserting that national safety should outweigh individual exemptions in this context. As the proceedings continue, the case underscores the ongoing tension between safeguarding national security and respecting individual religious rights, a debate that will likely influence legal standards for years to come. Deeply held religious convictions often clash with national security measures, sparking intense debate. Supporters of the government believed that requiring a photo ID was a crucial step to maintaining the safety and stability of the nation. They feared that granting religious exemptions could set a dangerous precedent, encouraging others to seek special privileges based on personal or spiritual beliefs. While recognizing the sincerity of individual faith, many argued that national security must take precedence in such cases. As tensions grew, the case drew widespread attention across the country. Legal experts analyzed its broader implications, and media outlets closely followed each development. For many, it became more than just a legal dispute. It was a reflection of fundamental questions about American identity, the limits of religious freedom, and how to balance individual rights with collective safety. After weeks of hearings and careful consideration, the case entered its final phase. The presiding judge, having thoroughly examined both legal arguments and societal concerns, faced the challenging task of weighing competing interests. This case was unique because it involved a direct conflict between religious beliefs and national security requirements. The judge had to consider not only constitutional protections, but also the potential risks to public safety if exemptions were granted. During the closing arguments, the defense highlighted the long history of religious accommodations in the United States. They emphasized that no individual should be forced to choose between their faith and their country. The defense also pointed out that the individual was willing to comply with the identification process through fingerprinting, which could verify identity without infringing on religious principles. Conversely, the government stressed the importance of the photo ID requirement, arguing that the post-heinous deviat 11 security landscape demanded stricter measures. They respected religious beliefs, but maintained that allowing exemptions could weaken national security efforts. Ultimately, the judge carefully balanced these perspectives and ruled in favor of the government. While acknowledging the individual's sincere religious beliefs, the court prioritized the nation's security and immigration control. The decision sparked controversy, igniting discussions about the limits of religious freedom in the context of modern security challenges. In his ruling, the judge addressed intense debates across the nation, emphasizing that the government must prioritize security above all else, especially in an era marked by rising concerns over terrorism and illegal immigration. He argued that requiring photo identification posed only a minor inconvenience for individuals, given the crucial safety benefits it offered to society. This decision disappointed many, particularly within the Amish community, which had hoped for a more accommodating outcome. While they accepted the ruling with regret, for Zir, it was more than a legal setback. It was a personal blow to his ability to practice his faith openly in the modern world. Nevertheless, the ruling provided a sense of closure, establishing a legal standard for similar cases moving forward. Zir's case underscored the delicate tension between protecting individual freedoms and ensuring collective security. It served as a reminder that, as threats become more sophisticated and widespread, courts will face tough choices balancing personal rights against societal needs. Although Zir did not achieve a legal victory, his case influenced future legal approaches to religious freedoms amid national security concerns, shaping policy for years to come. In April of 2004, Australia faced a landmark case that challenged its legal framework and sparked debate over transgender rights. Known as the Real Alex case, it involved a 13-year-old named Alex who sought hormonal treatment to affirm his male gender identity. Alex, a resident of Victoria, had been diagnosed with gender identity disorder, a condition where a person's sense of gender differs from their assigned sex at birth. The central question was whether the family court or the Victorian department responsible for Alex's care should approve medical interventions involving hormones to help him develop secondary sexual characteristics aligned with his gender identity. This case highlighted the complex intersection of medical ethics, legal authority, and minors' rights to make decisions about their health. It emphasized the importance of a careful, balanced approach to medical treatment for transgender adolescents, one that considers the urgency of support while safeguarding vulnerable individuals. The court's decision in the Real Alex case set a significant legal precedent, affirming the rights of transgender minors to access gender-affirming health care. It also ignited broader conversations within Australian society about recognizing and supporting transgender individuals, marking a pivotal moment in the ongoing dialogue about rights and health care for transgender people. As society's understanding and acceptance of gender diversity continue to grow, the case of Alex highlighted many intricate issues involving medical ethics, legal standards, and minors' rights. Born female, Alex had identified as male for several years before seeking treatment. His decision to pursue hormone therapy was made only after thorough deliberation with family and healthcare professionals. However, since Alex was under the care of the Victorian Department of Human Services, the legal process for making such a significant choice was particularly complex. At the core of this case was a fundamental question: should a child, especially one as young as Alex, have the authority to make such profound decisions about their own body? Addressing this involved weighing multiple interests, including Alex's autonomy, the medical community's insights into gender dysphoria, and the state's obligation to protect vulnerable minors. For Alex, this was more than just medical treatment. It was about living authentically. His medical team, experts in gender identity and adolescent health, supported early intervention, emphasizing its importance in reducing severe psychological distress and preventing the escalation of gender dysphoria with age. They argued that delaying puberty or postponing the development of secondary sexual characteristics would allow Alex to explore his gender identity in a safe environment, minimizing body-related confusion and discomfort. The involvement of the family court raised questions about whether such decisions should be made by the individual or their guardians, rather than the judiciary. The court's role was to determine if approving the treatment aligned with the child's best interests and adhered to current standards of adolescent health care. Opponents of the therapy expressed concerns about the long-term effects and the irreversible aspects of hormone treatment, especially for someone as young as 13. They questioned whether a minor could fully grasp the consequences of transitioning at such an early age, noting that even the medical community was still exploring the complexities of gender transition and its implications. The Australian Department of Human Services initially opposed hormone therapy for Alex, arguing that such a significant decision should be postponed until he was older and better able to understand the implications. This perspective reflected widespread societal debates about whether minors should have the authority to make irreversible choices about their bodies, especially in sensitive cases like gender identity. However, many medical experts, including specialists in gender health and pediatric endocrinology, strongly supported early intervention. They emphasized that allowing Alex to develop in accordance with his gender identity was crucial, warning that delaying treatment could heighten psychological distress. Without timely support, Alex would be forced to endure puberty's physical changes that conflicted with his sense of self, potentially causing lasting emotional harm. Moreover, postponement might complicate future transition efforts and lead to irreversible mental and emotional challenges. This case garnered significant attention from the Australian public and medical community as it raised fundamental questions about informed consent and adolescent autonomy. It prompted reflection on how much influence minors should have over decisions about their bodies and the role of expert medical advice in such matters. These issues extended beyond Alex's case, shaping the future approach to transgender healthcare for young people across Australia and internationally. In a historic decision, the Family Court of Australia ultimately ruled in Alex's favor. The court recognized that early intervention could be vital in supporting transgender youth and affirmed that Alex's desire to transition was both valid and deserving of legal and medical acknowledgement. This ruling marked a pivotal shift in Australian law regarding transgender rights, especially the rights of minors to access gender-affirming health care. The judgment underscored the importance of safeguarding Alex's well-being by permitting him to begin hormone therapy. The judge acknowledged the complexity and significant consequences of such a decision, but concluded that it was in Alex's best interests to proceed with the support of his family and healthcare professionals. The court's decision was based on a thorough understanding of the medical, psychological, and social aspects of gender dysphoria, carefully considering the long-term effects of transition. While celebrated as a victory for Alex and the broader movement for transgender rights in Australia, the ruling also sparked debate. Critics, including some in the medical field, expressed concerns about potential risks and the need for cautious, well-informed approaches to treatment. The case of Alex marked a pivotal moment in Australian society and medicine, highlighting a shift in attitudes toward gender identity. While some critics feared setting a precedent for minors seeking hormone therapy without fully grasping its complexities, the case underscored the importance of personal autonomy and legal recognition for transgender individuals. It prompted vital questions at the intersection of law, healthcare, and individual rights, expanding the boundaries of acceptable medical interventions for transgender minors. Although specific to Alex's situation, the case had broader implications, shaping how the rights of transgender youth are understood and protected across the country. Ultimately, Alex's case became a landmark in both legal and medical fields, serving as a reference point for future decisions involving gender-affirming care for minors. It ignited a wider societal conversation about providing transgender youth with the necessary support and resources to explore their identities in a society gradually embracing gender diversity. The court's ruling established a significant legal precedent, explicitly recognizing the importance of gender-affirming treatments like hormone therapy in helping transgender youth align their physical traits with their gender identity. This was seen as a victory not only for Alex, but also for the broader movement advocating for transgender rights, especially amid ongoing efforts for societal acceptance. The decision was widely viewed as a crucial step toward creating a more inclusive and understanding legal and healthcare system. It conveyed that gender dysphoria is a legitimate medical condition and affirmed that transgender minors should have access to appropriate care. The ruling also helped normalize the idea that early intervention is vital for the mental and emotional health of transgender youth, allowing them to begin their transition sooner rather than later. However, the case also sparked considerable debate. Critics, including some conservative groups and medical professionals, expressed concerns about the long-term effects of hormone therapy on young adolescents. They questioned whether minors could truly make such profound decisions and worried about potential regrets later in life, given the lasting impact of hormonal treatments. Despite these concerns, the case marked a significant step forward in recognizing the rights of transgender youth and fostering a more compassionate approach to gender identity issues. Debates surrounding adolescent gender transition often focus on concerns about maturity and decision-making capacity. Critics argue that minors may not fully grasp the long-term consequences of medical procedures, fearing that gender identity can be fluid and that young people might change their minds as they mature. This apprehension has led some to advocate for more cautious approaches, such as longer waiting periods or more comprehensive psychological assessments before initiating any treatment. The case of the young individual known as Alex highlighted what many saw as a breach of medical and legal boundaries in the lives of vulnerable minors. Despite these worries, numerous healthcare professionals and advocacy groups emphasized that untreated gender dysphoria could cause severe psychological harm, including depression, anxiety, and persistent distress. They pointed out that early intervention to align physical characteristics with gender identity could significantly reduce these risks, improving overall well-being. Many argued that the focus should be on supporting the immediate mental health of the individual rather than on potential future doubts. The distress caused by a mismatch between one's gender identity and physical development during puberty often worsens suffering, making timely care crucial. As public discussion intensified, the case also shed light on the complexities of obtaining informed consent from adolescents. Medical experts in transgender health stressed that, with proper guidance, minors could make informed choices about their treatment, especially when parents, mental health professionals, and doctors collaborated to ensure decisions were well considered and aimed at long-term health. This situation underscored the necessity of a multidisciplinary approach to transgender healthcare, one that addresses psychological, emotional, and physical needs comprehensively. In the years following the case, Australian laws and medical practices regarding transgender health continued to develop. The legal ruling in the Alex case served as a foundation for subsequent decisions involving young transgender individuals, encouraging a more open and supportive approach within the medical community. This shift marked a departure from earlier conservative attitudes, fostering greater acceptance and understanding of transgender youth. One of the enduring impacts of the Alex case was its role in reducing societal stigma and promoting broader conversations about gender diversity. Educational institutions, workplaces, and healthcare providers began adopting more inclusive policies, recognizing the unique challenges faced by transgender youth and the importance of support networks to help them navigate their journeys. In addition to providing safe spaces for young people to explore their gender identities, Alex's journey became a symbol of hope and resilience. For him, the court's decision marked a turning point, not only personally, but also as a catalyst in the broader movement for transgender rights. His case ignited a national dialogue, fostering greater understanding and acceptance of transgender individuals across Australia. While the legal victory was a significant milestone, it also signaled the start of a societal transformation that would continue to evolve in the years ahead. Following the ruling, Alex began hormone therapy and embarked on his transition, supported wholeheartedly by his family and healthcare professionals. His experience was one of perseverance and self-awareness, and he soon became an advocate, sharing his story to emphasize the importance of early support for transgender youth. His case, deeply personal yet impactful, sparked a movement advocating for the rights and recognition of transgender people nationwide. As Alex matured, he reflected on how his legal battle extended beyond his own life, representing the struggles of countless young individuals seeking authenticity without fear of discrimination. His journey, though fraught with challenges, contributed to a future where transgender individuals could access necessary health care without stigma or denial. His legacy reached beyond the courtroom, helping shape a more inclusive society where everyone's rights, respect, and opportunities are upheld equally. This case underscored the vital importance of listening to transgender youth, affirming their identities, and ensuring their rights are protected. It was a reminder that even amid opposition, safeguarding these rights remains essential. Alex's story exemplifies how legal victories can serve as pivotal moments in ongoing efforts for equality, inspiring societal change and fostering a world where all individuals can live authentically and without fear. The boldness and scale of these assaults revealed the growing strength and coordination of insurgent groups operating in the region. Following such attacks, militants sought refuge within the 16th century Cru Se Mosque in Padang, a revered religious site for local Muslims. This location became the center of a tense confrontation between insurgents and Thai security forces. Negotiations failed to resolve the standoff, and after a 7-hour siege, the military launched an assault on the mosque. All 32 militants inside were eliminated, and the structure sustained considerable damage. This incident drew international criticism, with many questioning whether the military's response was necessary or proportionate, especially considering the mosque's cultural and spiritual importance. In the wake of the incident, the Thai government declared a state of emergency across the southern provinces, granting security forces broad powers to combat the insurgency. These measures included the authority to detain suspects without formal charges and conduct searches without warrants. While aimed at restoring order, such actions sparked allegations of human rights violations, including arbitrary arrests, mistreatment, and extrajudicial killings. The insurgency in southern Thailand stems from a complex interplay of historical, political, and religious factors. The region has a significant Muslim Malay population that has long felt marginalized by the predominantly Buddhist central government. Decades of perceived neglect and discrimination have fueled separatist sentiments and calls for greater autonomy. Insurgent groups, often operating under the banner of the Barisan Revolusi Nasional, have employed guerrilla tactics such as bombings, targeted killings, and ambushes against both security personnel and civilians. The Thai authorities have responded with a combination of military operations, political initiatives, and dialogue efforts. However, the heavy-handed military approach has frequently been criticized for worsening tensions and alienating local communities. The absence of a comprehensive, inclusive strategy has impeded efforts to establish lasting peace. The events of April and May of 2004 marked a significant escalation, intensifying violence and instability in the region. The Cru Se Mosque incident exemplified the difficulty in balancing security needs with respect for cultural and religious landmarks. Subsequent government actions, including emergency laws and military crackdowns, remain subjects of ongoing debate. Many advocate for a more nuanced approach, one that addresses the root causes of the conflict, promotes reconciliation, and respects human rights. As the situation continues to develop, the lessons from that period underscore the importance of combining security measures with political dialogue and efforts to resolve underlying grievances. The local population plays a vital role in fostering a peaceful and sustainable resolution to ongoing conflicts. Following the violence in southern Thailand during May of 2004, the Thai government found itself in a delicate position. Insurgent attacks had not only challenged the authority of the state in the southern provinces, but also exposed deep-seated tensions between the government and the Muslim Malay community. Many residents viewed military actions as overly forceful, with the incident at the Cruz Mosque particularly igniting widespread anger and frustration. The military's decision to storm the mosque, resulting in the deaths of militants and damage to a sacred site, became a symbol of perceived insensitivity toward religious and cultural values. Critics argued that the government's focus on military crackdowns failed to address the underlying causes of the unrest. The government's reliance on a strong military response, coupled with the declaration of a regional state of emergency, further alienated moderate Muslims who felt caught between insurgents and authorities. Under this emergency, security forces gained sweeping powers, including the ability to detain individuals without formal charges, conduct searches without warrants, and hold suspects indefinitely. Such measures led to reports of human rights violations, including arbitrary arrests and mistreatment, which only deepened local resentment. This conflict was not a recent development. It had been smoldering for decades, dating back to the 1940s, when the Thai government began exerting greater control over the Muslim-majority southern provinces. Throughout history, the region experienced numerous uprisings, protests, and clashes as local communities resisted policies they saw as marginalizing their culture, religion, and identity. Despite occasional efforts at dialogue, the insurgency gained strength in the early 2000s, with new, more radical groups emerging to challenge the state's authority. The attacks in May of 2004 were viewed as part of a broader struggle for autonomy and self-determination. Insurgents perceived the Thai government as an oppressive force seeking to impose control over a region that had long maintained distinct cultural and religious traditions. Many militants, affiliated with the Barisan Revolusi Nasional, a separatist movement active since the 1960s, believed that violence was the only way to achieve their goals. Over time, they adopted more advanced tactics, including bombings, targeted assassinations, and ambushes against both military and civilian targets. Their aim was not only to weaken the state's grip on the region, but also to send a message to the international community about their desire for independence and recognition. The conflict in southern Thailand, rooted in deep political, social, and historical issues, placed the government in a difficult position. It was evident that the violence was not merely isolated criminal acts, but a widespread insurgency with complex origins. While the authorities aimed to suppress the unrest, they also faced the challenge of maintaining relations with the local Muslim community. The indiscriminate use of force and perceived insensitivity to local concerns only widened the divide between the state and the region's inhabitants. It became clear that military action alone could not resolve the ongoing instability. In the wake of the violence, the government began considering alternative strategies beyond military force. Calls from both domestic and international sources emphasized the importance of a comprehensive approach, including political dialogue, economic development, and addressing grievances of the local Muslim population. Many believed that resolving the conflict depended on tackling long-standing injustices such as the lack of political representation, economic opportunities, and cultural recognition for the people of the South. Without these fundamental changes, the cycle of unrest was likely to persist. International organizations, including human rights groups and United Nations agencies, also expressed concern over the situation. They urged an immediate halt to human rights abuses and called for genuine peace negotiations with insurgents. The incident at the Cruset Mosque in particular drew widespread global condemnation, raising questions about the justification of force in such a sensitive context. The loss of civilian lives prompted difficult debates over the rules of engagement and the ethics of military intervention in conflict zones. Despite these appeals for peace and dialogue, violence continued to escalate throughout 2004 and beyond. Subsequent months saw a rise in bombings, targeted killings, and ambushes, many resulting in civilian casualties. The insurgents, bolstered by local support and international attention, maintained their campaign of unrest. Meanwhile, the Thai government, under mounting pressure from both domestic and international communities, struggled to find a sustainable solution to restore peace and stability. Today, the conflict remains unresolved, serving as a stark reminder of the complexities involved in managing insurgencies rooted in historical grievances. The events of that period underscore the importance of adopting a comprehensive, inclusive approach to peace-building, one that addresses underlying issues and fosters genuine reconciliation. The events of May 2004 in southern Thailand marked the beginning of a prolonged period of unrest that would continue to trouble the region for years. The Thai government's initial response focused heavily on military measures, yet it became increasingly clear that such tactics alone could not resolve the deep-rooted issues fueling the conflict. The insurgency was not merely a series of isolated acts of violence, it reflected long-standing grievances within the Muslim-majority southern provinces. One of the greatest challenges for the authorities was managing the complex relationship with the local Muslim population. For decades, efforts to integrate these provinces into the broader Thai state had faced obstacles. The region's distinct cultural and religious identity, along with historical ties to Malaysia, made it difficult for the government to maintain effective control. Consequently, many residents felt marginalized and disconnected, fostering resentment and often supporting the insurgent cause. The insurgent groups, including the Barisan Revolusi Nasional, exploited these sentiments, portraying their struggle as resistance against an oppressive state that had long ignored their needs. Their goal was to establish an independent or autonomous region for the Muslim Malays of southern Thailand. To pursue this aim, they employed a range of tactics such as bombings, assassinations, and ambushes. While these methods disrupted daily life and caused significant casualties among civilians and security forces alike, the violence only intensified. In response, the government persisted with military operations, insisting that force was necessary to restore order. However, the heavy-handed tactics often alienated the very communities they aimed to protect. Reports of human rights violations, including extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detentions, and torture, emerged from conflict zones. These actions deepened local resentment and led many in the Muslim community to sympathize with the insurgents. It became clear that the conflict was not solely about violence, but also about cultural and political identity. Facing international criticism, Thailand was compelled to explore alternative strategies. Calls from human rights organizations and domestic voices urged a shift away from purely military solutions toward diplomacy. Many believed that a sustainable resolution would require not only ending the violence, but also recognizing the region's unique cultural and political aspirations. The persistent neglect of the southern provinces has long been a central issue affecting their political, economic, and cultural rights. Historically, this region has lagged behind the rest of Thailand, suffering from inadequate infrastructure, limited access to education and health care, and scarce economic opportunities. Many residents felt abandoned by the central government, which had prioritized more prosperous areas, leading to a deep sense of marginalization. This neglect, coupled with the government's failure to acknowledge the region's distinct cultural and religious identity, created fertile ground for insurgent movements to gain traction. A major factor fueling the unrest was the religious divide. While most of Thailand's population practices Buddhism, the southern provinces are predominantly Muslim. Efforts by the government to impose a unified national identity often clashed with local cultural and religious traditions, intensifying tensions. Many Muslims in the South perceived that their faith and cultural heritage were under threat from policies favoring Buddhism, which heightened feelings of alienation. This sense of cultural and religious marginalization became a powerful narrative for insurgents, helping them rally local support. In response to these grievances, some government officials began advocating for a shift in policy. They argued that a more inclusive approach was essential, one that recognized the unique identity of the southern provinces. Such a strategy would involve granting greater political autonomy, acknowledging Islam as a core aspect of local culture, and investing more heavily in the region's economic development. There was also growing awareness that military force alone could not resolve the conflict. Lasting peace would require dialogue and reconciliation between the government and insurgent groups. However, peace negotiations faced significant obstacles. The insurgents were fragmented into various factions, lacking unified leadership or a clear agenda, which complicated diplomatic efforts. Some groups refused to engage in talks, while others were willing but demanded recognition of greater autonomy or independence. The government remained cautious, fearing that concessions might weaken national authority and lead to further disintegration. Following the violence that erupted in May of 2004, the insurgency persisted, with attacks and clashes continuing intermittently. Despite ongoing efforts at peace and reconciliation, fundamental issues remained unresolved. Military actions and reports of human rights concerns often undermined diplomatic initiatives, while insurgent groups maintained their resistance, prolonging the cycle of conflict and unrest. The ongoing conflict in southern Thailand, fueled by local grievances and aspirations for a better future among the Muslim Malay community, remains unresolved. Despite efforts over the years, violence persists, claiming thousands of lives and leaving the region one of the most unstable areas in the country. The lessons learned from the events of 2004, particularly the importance of addressing underlying causes and adopting more inclusive diplomatic strategies, still hold true today. Achieving peace in this region is a complex journey, requiring more than military action. It demands a sincere commitment to reconciliation, open dialogue, and recognition of the unique cultural and political needs of the southern provinces. In June of 2004, a landmark legal case in the United States, Blakely v. Washington, highlighted critical issues surrounding sentencing practices within the criminal justice system. Ralph Howard Blakely Jr. had been convicted in Washington state for kidnapping and assaulting his former wife. Under the state's standard sentencing guidelines, his sentence should have ranged from 49 to 53 months. However, during sentencing, the judge found that Blakely had acted with deliberate cruelty, a fact not established by a jury, and subsequently increased his sentence to 90 months. The core question was whether this violated Blakely's Sixth Amendment rights, which guarantee a defendant's right to a jury trial for any facts that could lead to a longer sentence. The Supreme Court, in a narrow 5-4 decision, ruled in favor of Blakely, asserting that the Sixth Amendment prohibits judges from enhancing sentences based on facts not found by a jury or admitted by the defendant. Justice Antonin Scalia, writing for the majority, clarified that the statutory maximum sentence, used as a benchmark in Sixth Amendment considerations, is determined solely by facts proven through a jury verdict or admitted by the defendant. Any fact that could increase the sentence beyond this maximum must be presented to a jury and proven beyond a reasonable doubt. This ruling had a significant impact nationwide, invalidating sentencing systems that allowed judges to impose longer sentences based on unproven facts. It prompted lawmakers to reevaluate and modify sentencing procedures, ensuring that all factors influencing a sentence are properly determined by a jury or admitted by the defendant. The decision reinforced the principle that a defendant's right to a fair trial extends to all elements that could affect their punishment, fostering greater judicial fairness across the criminal justice system. The ruling in Blakely v. Washington underscored a fundamental principle. Any fact that could lead to a defendant's sentence exceeding the statutory maximum must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt by a jury. This decision reinforced the constitutional right to a jury trial and aimed to prevent judges from imposing harsher penalties based on unexamined facts. It marked a pivotal moment in the legal system by emphasizing the importance of jury participation in determining facts that could influence sentencing, thereby promoting fairness and transparency. The ruling reaffirmed that the criminal justice process must be open to public scrutiny and adhere to protections guaranteed by the Constitution. This case also signaled a broader shift toward a jury-centered approach in criminal sentencing, assigning more responsibility to juries for establishing facts that might lead to increased punishment. Essentially, Blakely v. Washington reinforced the principle that any fact capable of raising a sentence beyond the legal maximum must be proven to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. It highlighted the vital role of jury deliberations in ensuring a fair trial and set a precedent for future legal developments as courts examined and expanded upon its reasoning. These changes gradually influenced how sentencing and trial procedures were conducted across the United States. Following the decision, the implications for the criminal justice system were significant, especially regarding sentencing practices. The ruling prompted a reevaluation of long-standing procedures, particularly in states where judges had previously been authorized to enhance sentences based on facts they determined without jury involvement. Before Blakely, many jurisdictions employed sentencing guidelines that allowed judges to modify penalties based on various factors such as the severity of the crime or the defendant's criminal history, often without jury approval. This raised questions about the constitutionality of such practices, especially in systems with indeterminate or guidelines-based sentencing. In response, many states moved swiftly to amend their laws to align with the court's ruling. Several adopted new sentencing frameworks requiring any fact that could extend a sentence to be presented to and decided by a jury, rather than solely by a judge. This shift aimed to uphold constitutional protections and ensure that defendants' rights to a fair trial were preserved. Overall, Blakely's decision significantly influenced sentencing procedures nationwide, fostering a more jury-involved approach and reinforcing the principle that factual determinations impacting punishment must be made through a transparent, jury-based process. The recent legal shift prompted substantial reforms to sentencing frameworks, with some jurisdictions moving toward a system where mandatory minimum penalties are directly linked to jury findings rather than judicial discretion. Following this change, courts and legal scholars began re-examining how factors that can enhance sentences should be integrated into the criminal justice process. Traditionally, judges had considerable latitude in determining appropriate punishments, balancing the severity of the offense with the defendant's background. However, the landmark ruling in Blakely fundamentally altered this approach by asserting that any punishment exceeding the statutory maximum must be based solely on facts explicitly established by a jury. This decision underscored the importance of the jury's role as a safeguard against potential overreach by the judiciary, reaffirming the principle that critical sentencing facts should be decided by a peer jury rather than a judge alone. In the immediate aftermath, prosecutors and judges faced uncertainty about how to proceed, especially in cases where sentencing had previously relied on judicial findings of certain facts. Some trials, conducted under the assumption that judges could determine specific facts for sentence enhancement, now required reevaluation or retrials. This often involved revisiting cases where defendants had already been convicted but sentenced under guidelines now deemed unconstitutional, posing a challenge for the justice system to adapt while safeguarding defendants' rights. For many, Blakely signaled a move toward more transparent and democratic sentencing procedures. It aligned with the core protections of the Sixth Amendment, which guarantees defendants the right to have all essential facts decided by a jury. By requiring juries to determine any fact that could lead to a sentence beyond the legal maximum, the ruling emphasized that sentencing decisions should not rest solely with judges. This approach also prevented defendants from being sentenced based on untested or unlitigated factors, adding a layer of protection against potential biases or abuses of judicial authority. Nevertheless, not everyone viewed Blakely as an unequivocal advancement. Critics argued that the ruling placed additional burdens on the judicial process, potentially slowing down trials and complicating proceedings. They contended that requiring juries to deliberate on sentencing factors could extend trial durations and increase the likelihood of appeals. Some prosecutors expressed concern that this new standard might hinder efforts to secure convictions, especially in cases where enhancements based on prior convictions or aggravating circumstances had previously been managed solely by judges. In the years following the landmark case, a series of judicial decisions further clarified the court's position on sentencing and its connection to jury trials. A key milestone was the 2005 ruling in United States v. Booker, which expanded upon the precedent set in Blakely. The Supreme Court declared that federal sentencing guidelines, which previously permitted judges to increase sentences based on facts not established by a jury, were unconstitutional to the extent that they violated the Sixth Amendment. This decision reaffirmed that any fact influencing a sentence must be determined by a jury rather than a judge. Despite the clear stance in Blakely and subsequent rulings, the path toward reforming sentencing procedures remained complex. Many legal experts welcomed the court's emphasis on the jury's role in sentencing, yet concerns persisted about how to balance individualized justice with constitutional protections. Reform efforts faced challenges as lawmakers needed to navigate intricate sentencing laws while ensuring fairness and consistency in justice. As the legal landscape evolved, it became evident that Blakely had ignited a broader debate about fairness and transparency in American sentencing practices. While the ruling was celebrated as a victory for defendants' rights, it also underscored the tension between judicial discretion and the constitutional guarantee of a jury trial. This ongoing dialogue highlighted the necessity of maintaining a justice system that is both equitable and fair, one that provides defendants with a proper trial and ensures appropriate punishment. In the wake of Blakely versus Washington, the criminal justice system entered a period of deep reflection and potential reform. Scholars, practitioners, and policymakers grappled with fundamental questions. What does fairness in a criminal justice system truly entail? How can the right to a jury trial be harmonized with effective sentencing? The decisions made in this context would influence sentencing law for many years, shaping the ongoing debate about the balance between individual rights and state authority. A particularly significant aspect of the Blakely ruling was its focus on the jury's role, not only in establishing guilt, but also in determining the severity of punishment. Before this, many believed that sentencing, provided it adhered to legal limits, was primarily a matter for judges, considered the most knowledgeable legal experts capable of understanding case nuances, including aggravating and mitigating factors. However, the court's decision challenged this traditional view, emphasizing that the jury must be involved in all elements influencing sentencing, thereby reinforcing the core principles of fairness and constitutional rights. The factors that previously influenced sentencing decisions underwent a profound transformation following the Blakely ruling, which reframed the issue as a matter of fundamental rights. It established that any increase in a defendant's sentence must be based on facts proven beyond a reasonable doubt by a jury. This shift had far-reaching implications for both the structure and functioning of the criminal justice system. Most notably, it marked a turning point in how sentences could be determined, emphasizing transparency and public participation. Now, any facts that could lead to a harsher penalty needed to be openly debated and validated by a jury rather than solely by a judge. Many viewed this as a victory for fairness, ensuring that the authority to impose severe sentences rested with the community's representatives rather than with individual judges. The ruling also prompted a reevaluation of plea bargaining practices. Previously, defendants might admit to certain facts or accept plea deals involving lesser charges or sentencing enhancements. Post-Blakely, such admissions became more complex, as any fact that could increase a sentence had to be presented to a jury and proven beyond a reasonable doubt. This made plea negotiations more cautious. Defendants might hesitate to admit to facts that could lead to longer sentences unless they were confident those facts could be convincingly proven in court. For prosecutors, Blakely signaled a need to adapt their strategies, focusing more on presenting evidence that could justify increased penalties. They recognized that these facts would now be subject to jury scrutiny, prompting a more meticulous case-building process. While some saw this development as a natural evolution, strengthening the principle that sentencing should involve community judgment, others expressed concern about potential delays and increased burdens on already strained court systems. At the state level, lawmakers faced the challenge of aligning their sentencing laws with the new standards without sacrificing control over sentencing policies. Many states responded by revising their guidelines to require that any fact used to enhance a sentence be established by a jury. These reforms aimed to strike a careful balance, maintaining judicial discretion while safeguarding defendants' constitutional rights. As a result, the criminal justice system experienced significant reforms, striving for clearer sentencing procedures and greater transparency. With courts at both state and federal levels adopting new frameworks in response to Blakely, the overarching goal became ensuring that sentencing was fair, justified, and rooted in the community's collective sense of justice. The Blakely decision had a profound influence on the broader debate over fairness within the criminal justice system. It prompted lawmakers and reform advocates to reevaluate the entire approach to sentencing in the United States. Specifically, the ruling sparked a reconsideration of mandatory minimum laws, which mandated fixed prison terms for certain offenses. Critics had long argued that such laws stripped judges of discretion and often resulted in excessively severe sentences, especially for nonviolent offenders. As a result, Blakely's impact fueled momentum toward reforming or abolishing these rigid guidelines, aligning sentencing practices more closely with the principle that penalties should be based on facts proven in court. This landmark case also significantly shaped subsequent Supreme Court decisions. Just a year after Blakely's ruling, the court delivered its verdict in United States versus Booker, extending the reasoning of Blakely to federal sentencing guidelines. The court declared that guidelines allowing judges to enhance sentences based on facts not proven to a jury violated constitutional rights. This ruling reaffirmed that the right to a trial by jury extended beyond guilt determination to include the assessment of factors influencing punishment. The Booker decision not only reinforced Blakely's principles, but also marked a shift in how the justice system viewed the role of judicial discretion in sentencing. While many viewed these rulings as victories for defendants' rights, they also exposed ongoing divisions about the purpose of sentencing. Advocates for judicial discretion argued that judges, with their understanding of individual circumstances, were best suited to impose appropriate penalties. They warned that excessive restrictions could lead to overly uniform sentences that failed to account for case-specific nuances. Despite these debates, the overarching influence of Blakely was clear. It ushered in a new emphasis on fairness, transparency, and constitutional protections within sentencing practices. The case became a catalyst for reform, encouraging a justice system more committed to balancing individual rights with the goal of fair punishment. Initially met with resistance and uncertainty, the principles established by Blakely eventually became foundational in shaping a more equitable and balanced approach to sentencing. The case played a crucial role in pushing the criminal justice system toward greater fairness and respect for constitutional rights, laying the groundwork for ongoing efforts to improve justice and accountability. In August of 1973, a tragic event unfolded at the Adelaide Oval, a renowned sports arena in South Australia, during an Australian rules football game. Joanne and Kirst, who had been attending the match with their families, vanished without a trace while walking back to their seats. Their sudden disappearance stunned the nation as the case defied logical explanation. No witnesses saw them leave the grounds, and despite thorough searches and investigations, no concrete evidence emerged to clarify what had happened. The mystery captivated many, with their families holding on to hope that the girls would eventually be found. Over the years, various theories and rumors circulated, yet the case remained unresolved, leaving loved ones in perpetual anguish. Decades later, in 2004, a significant breakthrough occurred when new evidence surfaced, eventually leading to the identification of those responsible. This case had long been one of Australia's most haunting mysteries, but it was only then that investigators began to piece together the events surrounding the girl's disappearance. Detective Superintendent Des Bray, a seasoned investigator dedicated to the case, made a pivotal discovery. It was revealed that a man suspected for years had been involved in another, more recent case of abduction. This suspect, a man named Derek Percy, had a history of criminal activity against children, including a conviction for the abduction and murder of a young child in the 1960s. Authorities believed Percy's involvement in the Adelaide Oval case was plausible, given his presence near the scene at the time and his known pattern of crimes involving minors. Despite his past convictions and known whereabouts during the incident, there was no direct evidence tying Percy to the disappearance. The investigation grew more complex as police examined his violent history, including his connection to other crimes involving children. Percy had served time for his previous offenses but had never expressed remorse. Further inquiry revealed that Percy maintained contact with associates known for criminal behavior, some believed to be connected to the girl's case. However, concrete proof linking him directly to the disappearance remained elusive until forensic evidence was uncovered, which ultimately connected Percy to the crime scene. The abduction of Joanne and Ratcliffe, along with the cursed Gordon, became a case defined by a critical discovery: hair fibers found at the crime scene. Forensic analysis revealed these fibers matched Percy's DNA, providing a vital link that led investigators to suspect his involvement in the girl's disappearance. Although Percy consistently denied any connection, the forensic evidence was compelling enough to build a case against him. However, pursuing justice proved challenging due to the considerable time elapsed since the crime. The case exemplified the difficulties of solving long unsolved mysteries, as many witnesses who had been present at Adelaide Oval on the day of the disappearance had long since moved away and their memories had faded. Additionally, much of the physical evidence had been lost or degraded over the years, complicating efforts to piece together an accurate account. Despite the strength of the forensic and circumstantial evidence, securing a conviction remained elusive. The passage of time hindered the collection of new evidence, and key witnesses were no longer available. Percy, already serving time for other offenses, continued to deny any involvement in the girl's disappearance. The unresolved case became a haunting reminder of the vulnerability of young people and the lasting impact that such unresolved crimes can have on families and communities. Though justice was not fully achieved, the investigation kept the memory of Joanne and Ratcliffe alive in public consciousness. The case underscored the emotional toll that long-standing unresolved cases impose on families, especially those of Ratcliffe and Gordon, whose years of uncertainty were almost unbearable, while their hope that their loved ones might be found persisted. But as time passed, facing the harsh reality grew increasingly difficult. Despite the evidence pointing toward Percy, the family struggled to find closure as the legal system could not provide definitive answers. The disappearance of Joanne and Ratcliffe remained a tragic chapter in the nation's history, an enduring story shared through media and public discourse. It served as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance and the ongoing need to resolve cold cases, emphasizing that some tragedies leave scars that time cannot fully heal. Even within a society committed to justice, some stories remain unfinished, leaving families to grapple with unanswered questions that linger for a lifetime. The year 2004 marked a pivotal moment in the investigation, highlighting both a breakthrough and the inherent limitations of the criminal justice system when cases span decades. While the discovery of forensic evidence was significant, it could not fully provide the peace and closure that Joanne and Ratcliffe's families desperately sought. Their case continues to symbolize both enduring hope and the painful reality of unresolved grief. In the years following the disappearance of Joanne and Ratcliffe, the investigation experienced intermittent progress, with authorities revisiting old leads and re-examining overlooked evidence. It was only after a major breakthrough in 2004, when new forensic findings linked Derek Percy to the crime, that the case gained renewed momentum. The discovery of hair fibers from the scene seemed to offer much-needed clarity, yet these clues were not definitive proof. While compelling, they left gaps. No direct witnesses confirmed Percy's involvement, and the passage of time had degraded much of the physical evidence, complicating efforts to secure a conviction. Faced with these challenges, investigators turned to Percy's criminal history, hoping it would shed light on his potential role. Percy, a convicted murderer and suspected serial offender, had a long record of violent acts. In 1969, he had been convicted of abducting and killing a young girl named Michelle Manning, a case that cast a long shadow over his reputation. He was serving time for that crime when renewed attention was drawn to his possible involvement in the disappearance of Joanne and Ratcliffe. A disturbing pattern emerged. Percy had a history of abducting young girls and holding them for extended periods before disposing of them. The similarities between his known offenses and the details of the missing girls case increased suspicion. Despite mounting evidence pointing toward Percy, authorities faced the daunting task of securing a conviction after so many years had elapsed. In Australia, as in many other nations, the passage of time often works against prosecutors, especially in cold cases where witnesses are no longer available and physical evidence has deteriorated. Nonetheless, the investigation continued, driven by the hope of finally uncovering the truth and bringing some measure of justice to the families left behind. The case had long been compromised, with Derek Percy remaining the primary suspect in the disappearance of Joanne. Law enforcement faced significant challenges in building a case strong enough for court, especially without direct evidence. Instead, investigators relied heavily on circumstantial clues such as hair fibers and witness accounts, placing Percy near Adelaide Oval on the day the girls vanished. Yet this evidence alone was insufficient to secure a conviction. Percy consistently denied any involvement, and without definitive proof, the legal system struggled to bring him to justice. Despite these obstacles, the families of Joanne and the other girl refused to give up hope. Decades of searching, false leads, and mounting frustration took a toll on them, yet they held on to the belief that their loved ones might still be out there, somewhere in the world. As years passed, the likelihood of their survival diminished, but the desire for accountability kept their fight alive. For the families, the case transcended mere justice. It became a mission to preserve the memory of those they lost. They spoke publicly, raised awareness, and worked tirelessly to keep the story in the public eye, even when investigations seemed to stall. Their perseverance bore fruit in 2004, when new evidence once again drew attention to the case. The emotional strain was intense, as each breakthrough reminded them of the long wait for answers. The case also exposed shortcomings within the criminal justice system, particularly in how cold cases are managed. While advances in forensic science like DNA analysis offered hope for uncovering new clues, the situation also highlighted the need for systemic reform to prioritize such investigations more effectively. Many believed that earlier, more aggressive efforts might have led to a resolution sooner. The family's unwavering dedication resonated with the public, prompting questions about why it took so long for the case to be revisited properly. Media coverage played a crucial role in maintaining awareness, with stories of the missing girls regularly appearing in the news and fueling ongoing interest. But it was the family's refusal to let their loved ones be forgotten that truly kept the case alive. Their advocacy was deeply personal, inspiring the community to stay engaged and continue the search for truth. The introduction of new forensic methods in the early 2000s, including DNA testing, offered renewed hope that answers might finally be within reach. Advances in forensic science, particularly in analyzing hair and fibers, proved crucial in revisiting the case. The fibers discovered in 2004 offered a possible link to Percy, yet they also cast doubt on the reliability of the forensic methods available during the original investigation. As the case unfolded, it became evident that while modern techniques could shed new light, the evidence needed to secure a conviction decades earlier was often missing or deemed inadmissible. Investigators meticulously re-examined old records and re-interviewed witnesses, hoping to uncover overlooked details. However, the passage of time blurred many memories, especially among those present at the Adelaide Oval during the 1973 football match, many of whom had moved on and could no longer recall events clearly. Each new piece of evidence seemed to deepen the mystery, complicating the investigation further. Yet, despite these hurdles, the families of Joanne and Kirst remained steadfast in their pursuit of truth, driven by hope and the enduring impact of their loss. Their relentless search persisted regardless of the years that passed, keeping the case alive in their hearts. The disappearance of the girls from Adelaide Oval, marked by unresolved questions and ongoing efforts for justice, remains a significant chapter in Australia's criminal history. Although it took decades for progress to emerge, the unwavering dedication of the families and investigators sustained the case's momentum. Their perseverance left a lasting impression on the community, symbolizing resilience and the unyielding quest for justice. Despite the extensive attention surrounding Derek Percy, the case remained complicated. Percy consistently claimed innocence regarding the disappearance of Joe and Ratcliffe and Kirst Gordon. Since the case was reopened in 2004, Percy had become even more difficult to locate. The physical evidence, including the fibers, remained relevant, but insufficient on its own to definitively link him to the crime. A crucial gap in the evidence chain persisted, fueling lingering doubts. Beyond technical challenges, a broader issue complicated the pursuit: public fascination. Media coverage, documentaries, and ongoing investigations intensified scrutiny and pressure on authorities to deliver answers. This heightened attention added layers of complexity, making the quest for justice even more arduous. The case had deeply engaged the public, who had followed the girl's disappearance from the very start. The fact that it remained unresolved left many feeling uneasy, especially as investigators examined Percy's background and his possible links to other unresolved cases involving missing children under similar circumstances. Percy's reputation as a suspected serial offender only intensified the concern. Having spent years incarcerated for Michelle Manning's murder, his potential involvement in Joanne's and Kirst's disappearances added a troubling new dimension to the investigation. This heightened pressure on law enforcement to find answers and deliver justice for the affected families. However, each new discovery revealed the limitations of the criminal justice system. The passage of time made it increasingly difficult to find witnesses who could provide crucial details as memories faded and some key individuals had passed away. The absence of direct testimony hampered efforts to build a strong case, even with advanced forensic methods available. Tragically, many vital pieces of evidence had been lost over the years, making the pursuit of truth even more challenging. Following a breakthrough in 2004, public demand for justice intensified. The case was frequently featured in the media, often regarded as one of Australia's most haunting unresolved mysteries. Every new hint of Derek Percy's possible involvement reignited debates, offering both hope and renewed pain to the families. While the renewed attention reassured them that their loved ones' cases were not forgotten, it also constantly reminded them of their profound loss. Public sympathy grew, yet a sense of finality remained elusive. The core questions, what exactly happened to Joanne and Kirst and why, continued to go unanswered. Despite this, investigators persisted. Detective Superintendent Des Bray, who had led the inquiry from the beginning, refused to surrender. Having seen too many cases where the pieces remained scattered and justice seemed increasingly distant, he understood his duty was to keep searching. His relentless efforts aimed to uncover any remaining clues that might finally bring closure. The case of Joanne and Kirst was not solely about uncovering the truth. It symbolized a broader struggle to find justice for those who had vanished and to confront the lingering shadows of unresolved tragedy. The questions that once troubled Australian society at the time brought to light urgent issues regarding the vulnerability of children and the responsibilities of society to safeguard them. These concerns revealed significant flaws within the criminal justice system and underscored the difficulties investigators faced when tackling cold cases. Over time, memories could become distorted, complicating efforts to uncover the truth, while evidence often deteriorated or was lost as years passed. Although the breakthrough in 2004 rekindled hope, it also introduced new challenges. Prosecuting a case spanning many years, especially when based on circumstantial evidence, proved difficult. The legal framework was not well suited to handle such aged cases, creating substantial obstacles to securing a conviction. Even with growing suspicion around Percy's involvement, the absence of definitive direct evidence kept the case in limbo. The families of Joan and Kirst, after decades of waiting, experienced a mix of emotions. Having endured long periods of uncertainty and grief, they now found themselves caught between hope and despair. Their desire for justice was intertwined with a longing for closure, an urgent need to understand what truly happened to their loved ones and why. Meanwhile, the case had become a symbol of resilience, demonstrating that persistence could keep hope alive. The fact that investigations continued, that new evidence emerged, and that the families refused to give up served as powerful reminders of human strength and determination. The story of Joe, Ratcliffe, and Kirst Gordon was no longer just a criminal case. It embodied the unwavering spirit of those who refused to let their loved ones be forgotten. Although the case remains unresolved, the pursuit of answers persists. It became evident that many aspects of the mysteries surrounding Joanne and Kirst might never be fully clarified. The relentless passage of time had made it nearly impossible to reach a definitive conclusion, yet the families continued to live with the uncertainty of not knowing what truly transpired. Nonetheless, this case marked a significant chapter in Australian criminal history, illustrating the complexities involved in solving cases after decades of investigation. Even as the likelihood of uncovering the complete truth diminished with each passing year, the case of Joe, Ratcliffe, and Kirst Gordon remained a poignant reminder of the profound impact of unresolved disappearances. It stood as a testament to the enduring human desire for justice, regardless of how long the wait might be. For the families, time had not eased their pain. Instead, it had deepened their resolve to seek answers, a quest that would resonate through generations. In the year 2004, a criminal case in Australia drew public attention, not for its brutality, but for the shocking actions of the perpetrator. This was the case of the so-called Vandemonian fire, a devastating act of arson that had taken place in the heart of the community. In the industrial outskirts of Melbourne, an incident that initially appeared isolated soon revealed itself as a stark example of systemic neglect, allowing a criminal to operate unnoticed for years. The fire that erupted in the early hours of April 18, 2014, at a factory owned by Vandemonian Industries, left behind not only charred ruins but also a wave of unease and suspicion about what secrets might lie beneath the surface of the city's close-knit communities. Situated in a modest industrial zone on the city's edge, the factory handled a range of materials from chemicals to manufacturing tools. The blaze rapidly engulfed the entire building, consuming everything in its path, and it took hours for firefighters to bring the flames under control. The swift spread and intensity of the fire puzzled investigators, raising immediate concerns about possible arson. Upon inspection, traces of accelerants were found at the scene, confirming that the fire had been deliberately set. What initially seemed like a routine investigation soon evolved into a complex case involving a thorough search for a suspect who had been living unnoticed among the community for years. The incident was only the surface of a deeper story involving layers of deception, betrayal, and neglect. The first significant clue emerged from security footage captured by a hidden camera in an alley behind the factory. The grainy video showed a figure entering the premises during the night, carrying what appeared to be a petrol container. This evidence prompted investigators to revisit their list of potential suspects, hoping for a breakthrough. At first, no obvious leads emerged. The factory's owner, William McCabe, was a respected businessman with a reputation for reliability and safety. His company had no known enemies, and it seemed unthinkable that someone from within would want to destroy it. Employees expressed shock and disbelief, unable to imagine one of their own involved in such destruction. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that the arsonist possessed detailed knowledge of the factory's layout and operations, indicating a deliberate and precise act. The timing and manner of the fire suggested a personal motive, though investigators struggled to identify what that might be. Days went by with little progress, and the case appeared to reach a standstill. Authorities had a suspect in mind but lacked sufficient evidence to proceed with an arrest. It was only later, as new information surfaced, that the case began to unfold more fully, revealing a complex web of motives and hidden truths. As investigators delved into the relationships between the factory manager and his staff, they began to piece together clues about who might have been responsible for the blaze. One employee, a man named Simon Harding, stood out amid the emerging details. Harding had worked at Vandemonian Industries for several years, but recent months had been marked by rumors of unrest within the factory. He was known as an eccentric, reserved individual who had started behaving strangely just before the fire. Colleagues reported that Harding had become increasingly restless and agitated, often speaking about the company's impending collapse and a bleak outlook for the workers. There were also accounts of frequent disputes with McCabe over wages and working conditions. Some workers even claimed Harding had discussed taking drastic measures to make his frustrations known, though no one took these threats seriously at the time. When investigators examined Harding's personal life, they uncovered a troubling picture. His financial situation was dire. He had accumulated significant debt, which he kept hidden from family and friends. His relationship with his wife had grown strained, and he was on the verge of losing his home. In the weeks leading up to the incident, Harding's behavior grew more unpredictable, revealing mounting personal stress. It appeared he had reached a breaking point, and the fire at Vandemonian's factory was a desperate, misguided attempt to attract attention. The case against Harding grew clearer as evidence pointed to a calculated act. His motive stemmed from deep-seated resentment towards his employer and a desire for revenge. Further investigation revealed that Harding had meticulously planned the arson, not acting impulsively. He had researched how to set fires using accelerants and studied the factory's layout to maximize destruction. His goal was to send a powerful message, though he seemingly underestimated the extent of the damage he would cause. What made the case even more disturbing was Harding's efforts to conceal his involvement. He had deliberately disabled security cameras and tampered with the system to erase any footage of his actions. However, a fortunate break occurred when a hidden camera captured him on tape. This evidence proved crucial, allowing investigators to reconstruct the timeline of events. After being questioned, Harding eventually confessed to setting the fire. His actions revealed a troubled mind driven by financial desperation, anger, and feelings of betrayal. He insisted that his intent was not to harm anyone, but to make a statement about his grievances. Simon Harding's actions were intended solely to cause enough damage to make a statement, but he vastly underestimated the peril his act posed. The blaze inflicted severe destruction on the factory and nearby areas, with the danger of it spreading to adjacent buildings, which could have triggered a far greater catastrophe. His trial became a media sensation, as the public grappled with understanding the motives behind such an extreme act. His defense argued that Harding was under intense stress and suffering from mental health issues, while the prosecution insisted that his deliberate planning and execution demonstrated malicious intent that could not be excused. Ultimately, Harding was found guilty of arson and received a lengthy prison sentence. His case served as a stark reminder of how unresolved personal struggles and feelings of injustice can sometimes lead to devastating outcomes. Throughout the trial, the courtroom was charged with a mixture of emotions. The prosecution sought the harshest punishment, emphasizing the severity of the damage, while the defense aimed to humanize Harding by highlighting his personal hardships. The fact that no lives were lost complicated the case, as the court's decision would consider factors such as intent, mental state, and the level of planning involved. The defense portrayed Harding as a man pushed to the brink by mounting financial and emotional pressures. They described him as battling personal demons for months, with the fire representing a cry for help rather than a calculated act of destruction. They pointed to his overwhelming debts, troubled marriage, and dissatisfaction at work, which had left him feeling helpless and desperate. The defense also argued that Harding's perception of reality had fractured, leading him to believe that destroying the factory might somehow resolve his problems. They highlighted his erratic behavior in the weeks before the incident, withdrawal from social interactions, cessation of communication with colleagues, and visible agitation at work, signs they claimed indicated a mental breakdown. These symptoms, they argued, showed Harding had lost control of his emotions and judgment and should not be viewed as a typical offender. In contrast, the prosecution presented evidence that the fire was carefully planned rather than spontaneous. They pointed to security footage and other details that revealed meticulous preparation, suggesting that Harding's act was deliberate and calculated. The absence of any loss of life did influence the case, but the focus remained on the intent and mental state behind the arson. The trial underscored how complex such cases can be, especially when personal struggles are intertwined with criminal actions, emphasizing the importance of understanding the underlying causes that can lead to such destructive acts. Testimonies from the factory workers depicted Harding as a calculating individual who deliberately took measures to disable the facility's security system, ensuring the fire would remain unnoticed for as long as possible. Moreover, the accelerant he employed to ignite the blaze was not something typically accessible to someone experiencing a mental health crisis. The prosecution argued that Harding had been orchestrating the fire for weeks, meticulously planning each step without regard for the safety of others. One of the most disturbing revelations was Harding's intent not only to set the fire but to cause extensive damage to the factory and its operations. He knew precisely where to pour the accelerant and how to ignite it to maximize destruction. Despite facing personal difficulties, Harding's actions appeared deliberate, with careful timing and placement, and he showed no effort to alert anyone or attempt to extinguish the flames before leaving. This suggested a troubling lack of empathy and indifference to the potential consequences. As the trial advanced, families of the workers and local residents shared how the fire had profoundly impacted their lives. Many recounted living in fear, uncertain whether loved ones had been caught inside the burning building. Others described how their sense of security had been shattered and their routines disrupted by the disaster. Nearby business owners expressed concern about the long-term economic effects, noting that several enterprises had temporarily closed due to smoke damage. The community's trust had been deeply shaken, and a pervasive sense of unease lingered, questioning whether such an event could happen again. These emotional accounts illustrated the lasting psychological scars inflicted by the fire, even though no one was physically harmed. Community leaders and activists emphasized that the case symbolized how ordinary individuals, pushed to the edge by personal crises, could commit acts of destruction that ripple through entire neighborhoods. The defense argued for Harding's potential for rehabilitation, seeking understanding and leniency, while the prosecution maintained that the gravity of the act demanded a firm penalty. They highlighted Harding's calculated violence, noting that even in the absence of fatalities, his blatant disregard for safety and the well-being of workers, families, and the community was unacceptable. The prosecution highlighted that individuals like Harding, who intentionally set fires with the aim of causing destruction, could not be dismissed as mere victims of personal hardship. Instead, they must be held accountable for their deliberate actions. When the verdict was announced, the courtroom fell into silence. Harding was found guilty of arson, and the judge sentenced him to 12 years behind bars. This punishment served as a stark reminder that, despite the complexities of human circumstances, certain boundaries must not be crossed. The overwhelming evidence of his planning and the extensive damage caused by his actions clearly outweighed any personal struggles he faced. For the judge, it was evident that Harding's conduct went far beyond a simple emotional outburst or breakdown. His actions had been carefully premeditated, resulting in significant harm to the community. Harding's sentence brought a sobering conclusion to the case. As he was led away in handcuffs, the repercussions of his deeds rippled through the families affected by the fire, the wider community, and even the justice system itself. The incident prompted reflection among many who followed the proceedings, raising vital questions about the delicate boundary between personal distress and criminal conduct, and how those feeling trapped by their circumstances might lash out destructively. Harding's case would serve as a lasting reminder that, although understanding what drives someone to such extremes can be elusive, the consequences of their choices are often profound and irreversible. In the aftermath, the community embarked on a long journey toward recovery. The factory was eventually reconstructed, but the memories of that tragic night persisted. Harding's future remained uncertain. He was to spend the next 10 years incarcerated, his life forever altered by a grave mistake. For those impacted by the Vandemonian fire, emotional scars would never fully fade. They carried the weight of that night, often questioning whether anything could have been done to prevent the tragedy from occurring. While Harding's conviction appeared to bring closure, the echoes of the fire continued to influence not only those directly involved, but the entire community. The investigation revealed that the motives behind the blaze were deeply rooted in personal struggles and mental strain. As Harding was taken to prison, his case sparked ongoing media discussions about the complex relationship between mental health, responsibility, and crime. Although his defense argued that he was a victim of his circumstances, citing financial difficulties, a deteriorating marriage, and mental distress, the prosecution successfully depicted him as a deliberate actor. This was not an impulsive act driven by instability. It was the calculated decision of someone fully aware of what he was doing. Careful planning and deliberate choices by Harding pointed clearly to an individual who had intentionally sought to cause significant harm to his employer and the community. His detailed knowledge of the factory's layout and his calculated timing of the act suggested a conscious decision to inflict maximum damage, despite the personal turmoil he endured in the months following the incident. The aftermath of the fire left a deep imprint on the families of the workers and the local residents, many of whom struggled to find closure. They were left to piece together their shattered lives, trying to reconcile the Harding they had known, someone who had been a quiet, long-standing presence at the factory and regarded as a colleague or even a friend, with the reality of his actions. His calm demeanor and familiar presence had made it difficult for others to believe he could harbor such resentment or anger towards those he had worked alongside. The emotional scars from that night were not easily healed. Many recalled the terrifying moments when the fire erupted, realizing suddenly that something had gone terribly wrong and that escape was urgent. The factory, once a symbol of stability and security, was now associated with betrayal, as colleagues grappled with the shock that one of their own could be responsible for such destruction. Some workers sought professional help to cope with the trauma, but for many, the emotional impact persisted long after the flames were extinguished. The incident shattered their sense of safety and trust, leaving them uncertain about their future and their livelihoods. The wider community also felt the ripple effects. Many local businesses faced temporary closures due to extensive damage to the factory and surrounding environment, leading to significant economic losses. Yet, the emotional toll was even more profound. Neighbors experienced a deep sense of betrayal and fear, questioning whether others in their midst might harbor similar destructive tendencies. Once peaceful suburban streets now seemed uncertain, as residents wondered if there were individuals like Harding living among them. For authorities, Harding's case posed a complex challenge that revealed the fragile boundary between personal hardship and criminal intent. It sparked broader discussions about how to prevent similar acts driven by anger or desperation. Questions arose about whether signs of Harding's intent had been visible beforehand, and if his increasing stress levels could have been identified earlier. Although these questions proved difficult to answer, they fueled media debates emphasizing the importance of mental health awareness and support for workers under stress. The fire transcended its local origins, becoming a symbol of larger societal issues. It prompted reflection on whether companies were doing enough to address mental health needs and to recognize early warning signs among employees. Ultimately, the tragedy highlighted the critical need for proactive measures to support mental well-being and prevent such devastating events in the future. The aftermath of the incident at Indonesian Industries revealed troubling insights into the pressures faced by employees, especially those working in high-stress environments or under significant financial strain. Some experts argued that companies like Indonesian should have taken more proactive steps to support worker well-being, pointing to Harding's declining mental health as a warning sign. Others contended that such struggles are often difficult to detect, particularly when employees conceal their difficulties from their employers. The media coverage surrounding Harding's case had a profound impact on him during his incarceration. His story became a mirror for society, prompting reflection on the complex interplay between personal struggles and tragic outcomes. Many viewed him as a tragic figure, overwhelmed by internal crises and unable to see the full consequences of his actions. Conversely, some saw him as a calculated individual who deliberately caused destruction, fully aware of the potential harm. Harding's own perspective was ambiguous. In interviews, he expressed remorse, but his apologies seemed insufficient to meet the public's expectations of genuine regret. His actions had shattered lives, not only through the fire, but also by breaking the trust of those around him, causing emotional pain and financial hardship for many. During his time in prison, Harding engaged in regular therapy sessions as part of his rehabilitation, seeking not only forgiveness from others, but also reconciliation with himself. Over time, his demeanor and behavior appeared to change, indicating a desire to move away from the person he had been before the tragedy. Still, many remained skeptical about the sincerity of his transformation, questioning whether someone like Harding could truly be rehabilitated or if the damage was irreparable. As years passed, the fire at Indonesian Industries gradually receded from headlines, yet it remained a somber chapter for those affected. The factory was rebuilt, and the surrounding community began to recover, but emotional scars endured far longer. Harding's name continued to surface in discussions about crime, mental health, and personal responsibility, serving as a cautionary tale for future generations. It highlighted how unaddressed personal struggles could escalate into devastating events, impacting both individuals and society at large. Ultimately, the story of the Vandemonian fire was not solely about wrongdoing and punishment. It reflected a fractured society grappling with complex issues such as mental health, corporate duty, and personal accountability. The incident prompted a reevaluation of how we perceive those who commit acts of harm, recognizing that beneath their actions often lie deeper stories of pain, pressure, and unresolved conflict. Harding's actions, while condemnable, also underscored the importance of understanding the broader context behind tragic events, urging society to look beyond surface judgments. In 2004, Japan faced a shocking crime that left the nation in disbelief and its communities shaken. A series of brutal murders, meticulously planned and executed with chilling precision, unfolded in Tokyo's lively Shibuya district, an area famed for its vibrant nightlife, fashion, and entertainment. Beneath the neon glow and crowded streets, a sinister plot was quietly taking shape, ultimately disrupting many lives and leaving a dark stain on the city's history, marked by betrayal, manipulation, and tragedy. The first of these heinous acts occurred on a warm spring evening in May, when a young woman, only 23, was found brutally slain in a luxury apartment near Shibuya Station. Yumi Nakamura, an aspiring model and actress full of promise, was discovered by her roommate returning from a late shift at a nearby cafe. The scene was gruesome. Nakamura had been stabbed multiple times, her body sprawled on the floor amid a pool of blood. Initially, investigators faced confusion. There was no sign of a break-in, no items stolen, and no apparent motive. As the police began their inquiry, they interviewed Nakamura's friends, family, and acquaintances, seeking any clues in her personal life. They uncovered that she had been involved with a man named Taro Takahashi, a 28-year-old photographer in the entertainment industry. Known for his charm but also his temper, Takahashi quickly became a person of interest. Rumors suggested he was possessive, and neighbors reported hearing loud disputes from their apartment in the days before the murder. However, Takahashi denied involvement, asserting he had been at a nightclub in Roppongi with friends that night, and those friends confirmed his alibi. Further investigation revealed a troubling secret. Takahashi was heavily in debt and had recently lost several lucrative contracts with modeling agencies. Yet, no clear motive emerged to explain such a brutal act. As weeks passed, the case grew cold, and public attention waned. Still, the darkness cast by this crime lingered, hinting at deeper, unresolved mysteries beneath the surface of Tokyo's bustling streets. Another series of murders unfolded, eerily echoing the pattern seen in Nakamura's case. This time, the victim was a 29-year-old woman named Haruka, an emerging star in the fashion industry. Her body was found in her own apartment in Tokyo's Monado ward, having been stabbed multiple times. As before, nothing appeared to be stolen, and the police found no immediate suspects or clear motives. The pattern was unmistakable: two young, successful women, both involved in the entertainment or fashion worlds, brutally slain. Authorities could not ignore the growing link between these tragedies and began to suspect they might be the work of the same individual or group. It was evident that these acts were not random violence; they were deliberate, with a specific target in mind. As the investigation into Haruka's death advanced, a significant breakthrough came unexpectedly. A former associate of Takahashi named Kenji Yamamoto stepped forward with a disturbing confession. Yamamoto revealed that Takahashi had confided in him shortly before Nakamura's murder. According to Yamamoto, Takahashi had been struggling with his career, personal issues, and mounting debts. Driven by a desire to make a name for himself, he had begun exploiting his industry connections to manipulate young women into compromising situations. Yamamoto recounted that Takahashi had once said, "If I can't succeed, then no one can." He also claimed that Takahashi viewed Nakamura and S as rivals, jealous of their rising fame and convinced that eliminating them would allow him to take their places in the spotlight. This chilling information provided a possible motive for the series of murders. Police swiftly moved to arrest Takahashi for questioning. When confronted with the new evidence, he initially denied involvement, but eventually broke down and confessed. He detailed how he had carefully planned each attack, choosing moments when his victims were alone and vulnerable. Takahashi admitted to luring them into a false sense of security before carrying out the assaults in their own homes. His motives, he explained, stemmed from jealousy, anger, and a belief that he was entitled to the success these women had achieved. By removing them, he thought he could step into their roles within the industry. Takahashi's confession shocked the nation. The idea that someone so seemingly charismatic and well-connected in the entertainment world could harbor such violent impulses was difficult for many to accept. His actions, rooted in deep envy and personal failure, shattered the illusion of glamour that once surrounded him, revealing a darker side behind the facade of fame and success. News of Takahashi's arrests and the details of the incidents spread swiftly through the media, leaving the public to confront a darker side of the entertainment world. As investigations progressed, more unsettling truths about Takahashi's personal life surfaced, revealing that his outward image, an aspiring photographer connected to Japan's fashion elite, was merely a facade concealing a troubled inner world. Despite his professional achievements, Takahashi grappled with inner turmoil, and over the years his mental health had steadily declined. His growing inability to cope with professional setbacks fueled increasingly erratic behavior. The deeper authorities delved into Takahashi's past, the more disturbing his actions appeared. Once his career had shown great promise. He had contributed to prominent fashion magazines, and his work had appeared in many advertisements. Yet, as time went on, his star dimmed. The industry that once celebrated him grew distant, perceiving his style as outdated, and younger, more innovative artists began to overshadow him. Contracts with modeling agencies dried up, and mounting debts added financial strain, creating a volatile mix of stress and frustration. This professional decline also affected his personal life. His relationship with Yumi Nakamura, once a source of happiness, had become tense and strained. Nakamura, a talented young woman with her own ambitions in entertainment, grew weary of Takahashi's possessiveness and emotional volatility. Her decision to distance herself only intensified his feelings of inadequacy and resentment. These personal frustrations appeared to drive Takahashi further into a destructive mindset. His jealousy over Nakamura and another woman, both of whom had achieved recognition in the same industry he once thrived in, became a central focus of his obsession. To him, their success symbolized everything he had lost: youth, beauty, and control over his career. Takahashi's obsession extended beyond envy. It was driven by a desire to eliminate what he saw as obstacles to his own redemption. His confessions painted a chilling picture of careful planning. He described how he had chosen his victims deliberately, based on their ties to the industry he once belonged to. He followed both women for weeks, studying their routines and waiting for the right moment to act. In Nakamura's case, he had even arranged to meet her, indicating a calculated approach, rooted in obsession and a need to erase reminders of his perceived failures. Initially, their conversation seemed innocent, centered on a potential photography project. However, once they were alone in her apartment, his true intentions surfaced, darkening the atmosphere. Takahashi recounted the moments leading up to the act as if they belonged to someone else, describing how he had patiently waited for the perfect moment, carefully selecting the weapon he would use. When the time came, he attacked swiftly and ruthlessly, perceiving it not as an act of violence but as a means of regaining control. To him, it was a deliberate act of assertion, not impulsive rage. Haruka's killing followed a similar pattern. Takahashi had been aware of her rising fame in the fashion world and saw her as a direct threat to his declining career. Despite his fading relevance, he believed she embodied the future he had lost and felt compelled to eliminate her. He stalked her for days, observing her routines from afar, learning her schedule, and then luring her to her apartment under the guise of a photo shoot. Inside, he acted with cold precision, striking without hesitation. For Takahashi, these acts were not impulsive outbursts, but calculated displays of power. The sense of dominance he experienced during these acts was unlike anything he had known before, a twisted feeling of achievement, a way to reclaim what he believed had been unjustly taken from him. His motives, rooted in personal failure and emotional turmoil, were more complex than simple jealousy. In his distorted mind, the murders served as a method to restore balance, a form of cleansing to rid himself of long-held feelings of inadequacy. As investigators delved into his actions, they uncovered the extent of his manipulation. Takahashi had carefully built relationships with many in the entertainment industry, presenting himself as a sympathetic figure. Many trusted him, unaware of his obsession and resentment. His charm and charisma masked his insecurities and darker impulses, making his true nature difficult to detect until his confession revealed the full extent of his deception. Further investigation revealed a disturbing detail. Takahashi had not acted alone. While he was the one who carried out the crimes, he had received help from a group of individuals sharing his desire for revenge against those in the industry. These accomplices, driven by their own grievances, supported him by gathering information on the victims, providing tools, and assisting in covering up evidence. Comprising former associates and acquaintances, this group had been drawn into his web of lies and manipulation, enabling him to execute his plans with greater ease. During the trial, the public was struck by a profound sense of shock and disbelief. Many found it hard to comprehend that such a calculating and emotionless individual could have been living unnoticed among society for so long. This case ignited a broader debate about the immense pressures faced by those in the entertainment industry, the delicate nature of mental health, and the darker aspects of ambition. Takahashi's story served as a stark warning. Even those who appear to have it all together may harbor deep-seated insecurities and destructive tendencies beneath the surface. As court proceedings progressed, the families, friends, and colleagues of the victims grappled with their grief and the lasting impact of Takahashi's actions. The Shibuya murders became etched in Japan's modern history as one of the most tragic and shocking crimes, leaving a painful scar on Tokyo's vibrant entertainment scene. Throughout the trial, Takahashi's defense team sought to portray him as a man pushed to the brink by personal failures, financial hardship, and the relentless pressures of his career. They claimed he was suffering from a mental breakdown during the crimes, suggesting his actions were not entirely under his control. They even pointed to his history of emotional instability and depression, arguing that these factors clouded his judgment and led to his destructive behavior. In contrast, the prosecution firmly rejected the idea that Takahashi's mental state could justify such brutal acts. They emphasized that the murders were not impulsive outbursts, but carefully planned. Takahashi had stalked both victims, Yumi Nakamura and Haruka, for weeks, meticulously studying their routines and waiting for the right moment to strike. Using his knowledge of their lives, he manipulated his way into their homes under false pretenses before carrying out his attacks. His confession was chilling in its detail. He admitted to spending days contemplating how to eliminate his victims. The prosecution argued that this demonstrated a clear understanding of the consequences of his actions and a deliberate choice to commit them. The courtroom was tense as the trial unfolded, with the victims' families, particularly those of Nakamura and Haruka, attending each day. Their grief was palpable, and the heavy atmosphere reflected the profound sense of loss. They spoke openly about the love, joy, and hope that both women had brought into their lives before their lives were abruptly taken. It became painfully evident that Nakamura and Haruka were more than just victims. They were cherished individuals whose absence left a void in the hearts of those who loved them. Victims in this case were not merely figures in a legal proceeding. They were daughters, sisters, and friends whose loss created a profound emptiness in the hearts of those who loved them. Their deaths left an indelible mark on their families, transforming the courtroom into a space not only for justice but also for their voices to be heard. During tearful testimonies, Nakamura's mother recounted her daughter's aspirations and the bright future she had envisioned. Nakamura was on the cusp of breaking into the film industry, having received several offers from leading production companies. Her mother expressed pride in her daughter's unwavering determination and her anticipation of seeing her name in lights. The pain of losing a child in such a tragic and senseless manner is a burden no parent should bear. Similarly, S's family spoke with quiet dignity about their loss, describing their daughter as a lively spirit with so much ahead of her. Haruka had been an emerging star in the fashion world, with a future that seemed limitless. In a moving moment, Haruka's father, overwhelmed with emotion, recalled the last time he saw his daughter. He remembered her excitement about an upcoming photo shoot and her dreams of expanding her career and helping others. Through tears, he shared how full of life she was and how much she had to offer, now all lost. Throughout the trial, the defense attempted to argue that Takahashi's actions stemmed from mental illness. However, the families of the victims remained unconvinced, unable to comprehend how someone, regardless of their mental state, could take the lives of two promising young women with such cold calculation. They demanded justice not only for their loved ones, but also for all others affected by the tragedy. Takahashi's mental health was carefully examined by experts, with psychiatric evaluations revealing a history of depression, anxiety, and obsessive tendencies. He had been prescribed medication in the past, yet there was little evidence indicating active treatment at the time of the incidents. While the defense claimed that his mental health issues had overwhelmed him, the prosecution presented a contrasting view, that he was fully aware of his actions despite his personal struggles. As the trial drew to a close, the judge addressed the seriousness of the case, acknowledging the tragic loss of life and the emotional scars left behind. He recognized Takahashi's psychological suffering, but emphasized that the law must prevail over personal anguish. The crimes committed were unforgivable, and Takahashi would be held responsible. On the final day, Takahashi's fate was decided swiftly. The jury, after a brief deliberation, returned with a verdict of guilt on both charges. The courtroom was silent as the judge pronounced Takahashi's sentence: life imprisonment without the chance of parole. His legal team had hoped for a lighter punishment, citing his mental state, but the gravity and deliberate nature of his crimes left little room for mercy. The verdict brought a mixture of relief and sorrow to Nakamura's family, offering a small measure of closure but doing little to ease their enduring grief. As Takahashi was led away in handcuffs, he showed no emotion, his face impassive and detached, as if disconnected from the world and indifferent to the lives he had affected. The Shibuya murders would be remembered as one of Japan's most disturbing and senseless tragedies, leaving a deep scar on the entertainment industry, which was forced to confront the darkness lurking behind its glamorous facade. The public was compelled to face the unsettling truth that even those seemingly successful could harbor profound destructive emotions, which, if left unchecked, might lead to unimaginable violence. For the victims, their families, and the nation, this case underscored how fragile the line between achievement and downfall truly is, and the devastating impact of unchecked ambition. In the summer of 2005, a tragic and unsettling case shocked the American community, casting a long shadow over the small town of Shreveport, Louisiana. It all began on a hot July evening when a 22-year-old woman named Jessica Owens disappeared. Known for her quiet and reserved nature, she worked as a receptionist at a local law firm. Her disappearance initially seemed like a typical unfortunate event, but growing suspicion soon revealed a darker story. Jessica was last seen leaving her workplace around 6 o'clock in the evening, and from that moment, the case took on a more troubling tone. Walking toward her car in the dimly lit parking lot, she had been engaged in a phone conversation when suddenly the line went dead. A colleague named Amanda tried calling her back multiple times, but there was no response. Jessica often drove home late after working overtime, yet that night she never arrived at her apartment. Her phone was later discovered abandoned in a nearby alley, its screen cracked, suggesting it had been discarded hastily. Initially, local authorities believed Jessica might have simply lost her way or experienced an accident, especially since Shreveport was a peaceful town where such incidents were rare for someone so young. However, as days passed without any sign of her, the urgency of the search intensified, transforming into a full-scale manhunt. The community, accustomed to minor crimes, was unsettled by this unprecedented disappearance, a creeping sense of unease spreading through the town. During their investigation, police uncovered surveillance footage from a nearby gas station. It showed a tall, nondescript man approaching Jessica's vehicle shortly after she parked. The footage was blurry and did not reveal his identity, but his behavior was odd. He appeared to look around nervously, as if checking for witnesses. His slow, cautious movements suggested he was deliberately avoiding detection. Within hours, the case shifted from a missing person to a suspected abduction. A specialized team was assembled to find Jessica, and local media began broadcasting updates hourly. Fear gripped the town as residents grappled with the unsettling possibility that someone was preying on innocent individuals in broad daylight. Despite limited clues, the strange man's appearance sparked several tips. One came from a local resident who recognized him as someone she had seen wandering the neighborhood for weeks. To her, he seemed harmless, just another face in the crowd. But now authorities had to reconsider their assumptions. Days turned into weeks, and despite the media coverage, Jessica remained missing. The small town grew increasingly tense, with residents locking doors and whispering about a potential serial abductor lurking among them. Many wondered if a predator had been watching the community for months, patiently waiting for the right moment to strike. The case took a disturbing turn when a second woman, 25-year-old Melissa Carter, vanished just a few weeks later. She was last seen leaving her workplace in the early evening, mirroring Jessica's disappearance. What made her case even more chilling was that her car was found parked in the same lot as Jessica's, as if history was repeating itself. Authorities now feared they were dealing with a serial abductor, someone who carefully chose victims who appeared inconspicuous, blending into the background until it was too late. The investigation continued, haunted by the unsettling question: what had truly happened to Jessica Owens? Deepening their investigation, detectives began to see connections between the two women's disappearances. Both were young professionals with little known history of conflict or risky relationships. Initially, it seemed their cases were isolated, random acts with no clear link. However, a breakthrough arrived when a witness stepped forward, offering a crucial lead. He recounted seeing a suspicious figure near the parking lot on the evening Jessica vanished. Weeks later, he observed the same figure close to the scene when Melissa disappeared. The witness, previously too frightened to speak, now revealed that he had noticed a black van parked nearby during both incidents. Though seemingly insignificant at the time, this detail soon proved vital. Authorities swiftly began searching for the vehicle. They examined rental records and local businesses, piecing together clues that eventually led them to a Odna Tisiacha Devianosto Vosem Ford van. Multiple witnesses confirmed seeing the same vehicle in the area. It was registered to a local mechanic named Carl Peterson, a 48-year-old man known in Shivaport as quiet and unremarkable. With no criminal record or history of violence, Peterson appeared to be a typical hard-working individual. Yet, as investigators probed deeper, unsettling facts emerged. Neighbors described Peterson as eccentric but harmless, living alone in a modest house on the town's outskirts. Recently, however, they noted his behavior had changed. He had become paranoid, reclusive, and obsessively cleaned his van's interior. These peculiar habits raised questions. Why was he so fixated on his vehicle? What was he doing around the time of the women's disappearances? As police prepared to obtain a search warrant, they sensed that the case was about to take a darker turn. The tension in Shivaport grew as authorities moved quickly to secure a search of Peterson's property. His home, tucked away on a quiet street, seemed unremarkable at first glance, just another small, aging residence. Yet when police arrived, it was clear that things were more complicated than they appeared. The front door was locked, and no one responded to their knocks. Nervous neighbors watched from their windows, whispering speculations about what might be happening. Police, aware of the urgency, forced entry into the house. Inside, they found a stark, meticulously tidy space, devoid of personal clutter, hinting at a disturbing underlying story. The investigation revealed no signs of a violent struggle or any indication of sinister activity at the scene. However, as authorities conducted a more thorough search, They uncovered a disturbing find in the basement, a collection of hundreds of photographs. Some images appeared professionally taken, while others were more casual, yet all focused on young women. Many faces were unfamiliar, their features hauntingly beautiful, captured in moments of apparent obliviousness, with vacant eyes that seemed to reflect a loss of awareness. As investigators examined the collection, they noticed that some women bore a striking resemblance to Jessica Owens and Melissa Carter, two individuals who had been missing for several weeks. The unsettling aspect was not only the photographs, but also the meticulous dates written on their backs. These dates corresponded to locations where the women had been, such as streets or stores they had visited. It became evident that the individual responsible had been monitoring their routines for a prolonged period, possibly months or even years, tracking their movements and learning their habits. This realization added a far darker dimension to the case. Further digging led police to discover a concealed room at the rear of the basement, sealed off from the main area. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the walls were lined with old newspapers, many yellowed with age. At the center of this hidden space was a small desk cluttered with maps, notes, pins, and strings, connecting various locations across Shreveport. These maps appeared to mark places Peterson had frequented or observed, likely spots where he had kept watch over his victims. More disturbing still was the discovery of a large locked chest in the corner of the room. When opened, it revealed personal belongings stolen from the missing women, jewelry, a wallet, earrings once owned by Melissa Carter, and a necklace that Jessica Owens had been wearing when last seen. It was as if Peterson had been collecting trophies, keepsakes from women he had observed from the shadows before making his move. The pattern of evidence suggested that Peterson had been stalking not only Jessica and Melissa, but potentially other women as well. Yet, without physical remains or concrete proof of harm, authorities could only speculate about the extent of his actions. The question remained whether he had abducted these women or if they were still alive somewhere, which made the case all the more terrifying. With this new evidence, police moved to arrest Carl Peterson, charging him with multiple offenses related to the disappearances. The arrest of Carl Peterson for kidnapping and unlawful detention sent shockwaves through Shreveport, prompting residents to question how someone so seemingly ordinary could harbor such dark secrets for so long. Throughout his apprehension, Peterson remained unnervingly composed, almost as if he had anticipated this moment. He made no effort to resist arrest, attempt an escape, or conceal his actions, and his silence only deepened suspicions that he knew more than he was revealing. Despite their best efforts, investigators struggled to get him to speak about the missing women, as he carefully chose his words or remained entirely silent. His defense claimed innocence, arguing that the evidence was circumstantial at best. However, as days passed, authorities uncovered disturbing details that painted a clearer picture of Peterson's obsession. They couldn't ignore the growing collection of photographs, maps, and trophies linked to the victims. Meanwhile, the families of Jessica Owens and Melissa Carter clung to hope, believing their daughters were still alive, missing for reasons unknown. Yet each new discovery chipped away at that hope, transforming the case from a simple disappearance into a quest for truth, no matter how painful. Law enforcement was racing against time to find the women, trying to determine if they were still alive and uncover Peterson's motives. Was his interest driven solely by a desire for control, or was there something deeper fueling his actions? Questions multiplied. How many other women had he been watching? How many others remained unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows? The case grew increasingly complex, and the community's fear intensified. Each missing person and each new piece of evidence about Peterson's activities served as a stark reminder that evil can hide behind familiar facades. As Peterson's trial approached, Shreveport prepared itself for the revelations that would expose the darkness lurking beneath its quiet surface. For months, the town had been gripped by anxiety and uncertainty. Now, with Peterson in custody, the demand for justice was overwhelming. The prosecution presented compelling evidence, photographs, maps, and personal items from the victims that confirmed Peterson's obsession. Yet a lingering question remained. Where were Jessica Owens and Melissa Carter? Were they still alive, held captive, or had they suffered a worse fate? Authorities searched his residence, vehicle, and property thoroughly, but the answers remained elusive. The community waited anxiously, hoping for clarity amid the shadows. Without any physical evidence linking them, the prosecution faced a daunting challenge in establishing the guilt of the accused for the murders. Despite an increasing amount of circumstantial evidence, Peterson maintained a calm and impassive demeanor throughout the proceedings, offering no explanations for his actions. His unwavering silence only heightened the unsettling atmosphere of the case. Some observers interpreted his composed attitude as a sign of guilt, while others believed he was simply emotionally detached. As the trial progressed, details about Peterson's background painted a more disturbing picture. His early life was unremarkable. Born and raised in Shreveport by strict but not abusive parents, with no history of trauma or hardship. After graduating high school, he worked various unremarkable jobs before settling into a career as a mechanic. Nothing in his childhood or adolescence suggested he would become involved in such heinous acts. This ordinary facade made the case even more frightening. Peterson appeared to be just an average man, blending seamlessly into the community, with no apparent motives or signs of a troubled past. He had never married or maintained long-term relationships, and his interactions with women seemed limited to distant observation. Former friends and colleagues testified that he kept to himself, avoiding social contact, living alone, and seemingly obsessed with watching others' lives from afar. It was as if he viewed women as objects in some twisted game rather than individuals. The defense argued that Peterson was a victim of circumstance, suggesting his obsessive tendencies stemmed from a deeply repressed psyche. His lawyer claimed he never intended harm, instead trying to connect with women he admired from a distance. They portrayed him as a lonely man unable to form genuine relationships, who had become lost in a world of delusion. Furthermore, the defense emphasized the lack of concrete evidence linking Peterson directly to any abductions or assaults, pointing out that the photographs and items found could have been obtained without force. This was an attempt to sow doubt among the jury, but it failed to outweigh the overwhelming evidence against him. During the trial, an unexpected development occurred. A third woman stepped forward. Rachel Sanders, a 27-year-old teacher who had recently moved to Shreveport, recounted her experiences. She described how she often saw a black van parked near her apartment complex, though she had never realized she was being watched at the time. He had noticed someone observing her from afar, but initially dismissed it as coincidence or a passing stranger. As the investigation into Peterson progressed, she realized that the man she had seen was the same individual who had been stalking Jessica and Melissa. Rachel's testimony sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Trembling, she described how her unease grew as she increasingly noticed the same van parked near her school, gym, and favorite coffee shop over several months. Unaware of Peterson's presence in her life at first, she now recalled all the subtle, seemingly insignificant moments that had gone unnoticed. The fact that she had narrowly escaped becoming his next target was chilling. Her bravery in speaking out provided crucial support for the prosecution, helping to clarify Peterson's long-standing obsession with women. He had been watching, following, and taking mental notes on their routines and habits for years. Rachel's account also raised a disturbing question. How many other women had been living in fear without realizing it? How many had unknowingly crossed paths with Peterson only to slip away, scarred but safe? As the trial unfolded, it appeared Peterson had been orchestrating a twisted game in which he was the unseen observer, treating his victims as mere pawns. He had meticulously documented each woman's movements, preferences, and social interactions, viewing them as objects to study, manipulate, and control. The thought that he had watched these women for months before acting added a horrifying dimension to the case. As the proceedings neared their end, the jury deliberated for hours, carefully weighing the evidence, testimonies, and the unsettling reality of what had transpired. There was little doubt that Peterson was responsible for the disappearances of Jessica Owens and Melissa Carter. The key question was whether the evidence sufficed for a conviction of murder, or if the defense would argue that Peterson's actions stemmed from some psychological disorder, impairing his understanding of his conduct. Ultimately, the prosecution's case prevailed. The jury found Carl Peterson guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with multiple charges of kidnapping, stalking, and unlawful detention. The verdict brought a mixture of relief and horror. Relief that the man behind the terror in Shreveport was finally held accountable, and horror at the extent of his crimes, and the realization that the community had been living with a predator in their midst for so long. Carl Peterson was sentenced to life imprisonment. The families of the victims were left to grieve in silence, knowing their daughters would never return home. For the town of Shreveport, however, the trial served as a stark reminder that some of the most frightening threats are hidden in plain sight, often unnoticed until it's too late. The case underscored the unsettling reality that danger can sometimes lurk among us, cloaked in ordinary appearances, making the community painfully aware of the lurking shadows that can exist unnoticed in everyday life.